In Marvel, you refer to this as magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, 3 Supers vs. Purple Potato. With a roar from Thor, the battle officially began. The blue lightning illuminated the dark sky. With the lightning, Thor rushed up first, with Stormbreaker in his right hand and Mjolnir hammer in his left hand. He looked like Mr. Muscular. At the same time, Tony Stark also flew into the sky, and the right hand of his armor turned into a giant blade, slashing down fiercely at Thanos. Thanos dodged Thor's attack, grabbed Thor's right hand with his right hand, and blocked Tony Stark's slash with Stormbreaker. Then, he kicked Steve Rogers away. In the first round, Thanos temporarily won. Of course, the battle was not a round-based system. If one attack failed, the 3 people attacked again. Tony Stark's laser beam was blocked by Thanos' arms, but then he was hit on the back of his head by Steve Rogers' shield. Thor also rushed up. Although the battle axe in his right hand was kicked away by Thanos, the Mjolnir hammer in his left hand accurately hit Thanos' chest. Thanos flew out in response. In the second round, the 3 superheroes fought against Xiao Bao. Ronan was not as relaxed and happy as before. The reason was simple. Thanos' weapons had been attacking the mirror dimension, and Ronan was almost unable to hold on. Weapons are not like humans, and can be confused by the 5 senses such as vision and hearing. Therefore, although the mirror dimension has been upgraded, Ronan has only learned it for a few days. He is a rookie. At least that's the case now. Although I don't want to admit it, this is the fact. Dear superheroes, I can only hold on for 20 seconds at most. After 20 seconds, you will fight a Thanos with weapons. Ronan's voice reached the ears of several people. As an external aid of the Avengers, he naturally wore wireless headphones and could hear them talking. However, it must be said that Tony Stark is rich. The base behind was blown to slag, but there was still a signal between them. 20 seconds? You are so young. Why are you so weak in endurance? Soon, the answer came from Ronan's headphones. Ronan rolled his eyes. There was no need to tell. The person who said this could only be Tony Stark. This person has been holding a grudge. When the two were about to travel to this timeline, Ronan mocked him. Old men are fast. But unexpectedly, this person still remembered it. I'm fast because the machine is running in for the first time. And you're fast because the machine has reached the scrap age. Ronan fought back without showing any weakness. In any case, in terms of verbal persuasion, Ronan has never been inferior to others in his life. However, before Tony Stark could fight back, Scott Lang's voice came from the headset. Guys, stop showing off your sense of humor. We are about to drown. From Scott Lang's side, the sound of water splashing could be heard from time to time. Obviously, they had been submerged in water and were at a loss. Ronan, go save them. We are responsible for delaying Thanos. Steve Rogers' voice sounded. As the commander-in-chief of this battle, even Tony Stark tacitly recognized him as the captain of the team. At the same time, Ronan's dimensional mirror finally couldn't hold up and shattered in front of him. Thanos' weapon also flew back to his hand. Okay, remember to pay me for my service. Ronan curled his lips, jumped back lightly, and the arcane door swallowed him. Although the scene of the 3 superheroes fighting Thanos was temporarily stopped, Ronan didn't say much. When he appeared again, he was already above several people. Scott, I'm above you. Next, just protect your head and leave the rest to me. Ronan said into the headset. Can't you use your circle to take us all out? Scott Lang had obviously heard of Ronan's ability. Yes, but you have to be mentally prepared. After saying that, Ronan didn't wait for Scott Lang to reply, and 2 rings of Raggedl appeared in his hands. The next second, the arcane door opened from Ronan's head. Bruce Banner's huge body fell down immediately. Ronan's observation haki made him dodge ahead of time, and Bruce Banner also fell heavily to the ground. Raccoon and Scott Lang also appeared at the same time. Oh, and War Machine, whose presence has always been weak. The next second, the surging sea water gave them a bath again. Puff. Bruce Banner spit out a mouthful of water and looked at Ronan with a little gratitude. However, he saw another scene. Ronan held 2 magic rings to block his head, and the water completely hit the magic rings, without splashing any water on him. After confirming that the secret door was completely closed, he cancelled the magic ring in his hand. The magic that Kamatachi taught you, is it for you to use like this? Although, thank you anyway. War Machine opened his mask, and witnessed what happened just now. Although he didn't say the words behind, the meaning was self-evident. Ronan just nodded, and the secret door appeared again. The plot over there is more exciting, and he doesn't want to miss such an exciting plot. Sure enough, when Ronan returned to the center of the battlefield again, Thor was pinned to the ground and beaten by Thanos. As soon as he came over, he saw Thanos beating Thor. Thanos, you still say you don't know martial arts? Then, the scene that excited countless Marvel fans appeared. Captain America, Steve Rogers. He picked up Thor's hammer. Oh, if someone was next to him, I'm afraid they would really shout out excitedly. Next, Steve Rogers used the 3-axe set, which almost stunned Thanos. Especially the move of the hammer hitting the shield. Who knows how many times Steve Rogers secretly practiced it in his mind. Well done, Captain. Scott Lang couldn't help shouting. However, just after he finished shouting this crow's mouth, the situation on the field was reversed in an instant. Now it was Steve Rogers who was pinned to the ground and beaten. Just watch Thanos hit Steve Rogers' iconic weapon from a round shield to a half-round shield with one knife after another. One knife after another. Finally, he was kicked away. Oh. Ronan made a strange sound, and the eyes of several other people also turned to Scott language. The scene was extremely awkward for a while, but Ronan's energy was not on Scott language. His eyes were fixed on the big knife in Thanos' hand. Weapons that can cut vibranium into that kind of thing are rare on Earth. You know, when Meow Hammer and Captain America's shield fight together, it is impossible to tell the winner in some ways. So, that weapon is definitely a good thing. Since Thanos' ending is destined to be death, it is better to keep this weapon for yourself. After all, every supreme sorcerer has his own collection. The Cosmic Cube has been placed in Ronan's treasure house. The next collection is this big knife. Thanks to I-20216130742462220 for the 100 starting coins reward. Thanks to the fish in the pot for the 100 points reward. Thank you. Chapter 27. Are you the boss that Wong was talking about? Thanos didn't know that his weapon had been targeted by Ronan. At this moment, he was still giving an impassioned speech. Perhaps he had never heard of the famous saying that villains die because they talk too much, so he gave Steve Rogers and others a chance to breathe. Even if he summoned his army of followers. If he had just rushed up to deal with Steve Rogers and others, his ending might really be rewritten. At least in the next battle, he could face fewer powerful superheroes. Soon, as groups of troops were sent out from Thanos' spaceship, Scott Lang and others were dumbfounded. Are you kidding? War Machine swallowed his saliva. Obviously he had never seen such a big scene. Especially Thanos' army is very reasonable. The land and air forces complement each other. In addition to some small infantry, they also have armored gorillas and the flying gun that Ronan had just seen not long ago. Yes, it's the one that Loki brought when he invaded the Earth. It was also the one that was killed by Hulk in one punch. Unfortunately, what Thanos didn't know was that in Ronan's eyes, what he sent was not an army, but a gift package of experience. Tell me, we also have support like this. The raccoon looked at the other people on the side. However, he didn't answer his question. Support. They were already the last support. Someone is coming. Just when several people were a little desperate, Ronan suddenly spoke, because he felt the spatial fluctuations of the secret door. Before Bruce Banner asked the question, a voice rang in their headphones. Captain, can you hear me? The owner of the voice was Falcon, the candidate for the next Captain America. Of course, the right color is half the battle. Steve Rogers, who was already a little desperate, stood there in disbelief. On your left. Falcon's voice rang again. This sentence was said when the two of them were running together. Steve Rogers circled him again and again, and every time he passed Falcon, he would leave this sentence. Every time he said this sentence, Falcon's defense would be broken. And this time, Falcon also had a little revenge mentality. As soon as the words fell, the light of the secret door also appeared on the left side of Steve Rogers. Black Panther, wearing a Black Panther suit, walked out of the portal. Behind him, there were thousands of Wakandans. Steve Rogers panted and watched the Falcon fly out of the portal. Looking at this comrade who had disappeared for several years, a myriad of emotions suddenly surged into his heart, and he didn't know where to start. Then, one after another secret door appeared behind Steve Rogers. The second person to appear was Strange, who had been trapped on Titan. Behind him were several people from the Guardians of the Galaxy. Among them was the most eye-catching one, Star-Lord, who punched out Avengers 4. It seems that he is worried about the box office of Avengers. Oh, is this the wizard? The Strange you are talking about? Scott Lang saw Strange at a glance. Well, that's Stephen Strange, the one who disappeared after the last battle with Thanos. Bruce Banner nodded, and his heart was also filled with pride. They are not fighting alone. They also have an army belonging to the Earth. Wow, then there won't be any air disputes among you? Just like I read some Oriental literature, several heirs will fight to the death. Scott Lang quietly approached Ronan. Ronan curled his lips. The Battle of Heirs? Thinking too much. If he hadn't been delayed by school, with the time he had in Kamatage, he might be able to kill Strange in seconds. So, why does he still need to go to school? While several people were talking, various armies appeared in these portals. From the Asgardians, led by the Valkyries, the Kamatage Wizard army led by the king. Of course, there are also several extremely high-end combat forces. For example, the Scarlet Witch, who has a very high hatred value with Thanos. TSK. Revenge for killing her husband. And this was after Scarlet Witch killed Vision, and she watched her husband resurrect, and was killed by Thanos again. With this calculation, the two can be said to have a deep blood feud. Okay guys, it's our turn. Seeing so many troops on his side, Scott Lang also unfolded his huge body. Except for Ronan, the other few people were also brought to the center of the battlefield. As for Ronan, he had already arrived at the wizard's camp. When he just landed, he heard Strange's voice. Is that all? Strange asked. Why, do you think there are not enough people? Wang looked at Strange in surprise, but just as he finished speaking, Ronan hugged his shoulders. Although he was wide, Ronan could only barely hug his shoulders. But the relationship was expressed. Hey, Wang. See you again so soon. Ronan patted Wang on the shoulder and looked very happy. Ronan was of course happy. In addition to voting for Wang's spell for nothing, he also stole an apple and a chair from him. Speaking of which, I still feel a little guilty. Ronan, you are here too? Don't tell me that you took my favorite chair. Wang turned his head and looked at Ronan, as if he already knew it. Obviously, among all the Avengers, Ronan is the only one who can easily take things from Kamatage without being discovered. Haha, it's just a chair. Next time, I'll treat you to a 3-layer royal burger. Ronan laughed and wanted to pass on the topic. Who knew that it was Wang's favorite chair? If he knew, he would still take it. Sorry to interrupt. Wang, is this wizard your new friend? Strange interrupted the friendly exchange between the two. For some reason, Ronan always smelled a sour smell in the air. Maybe someone's Vinegar bottle fell behind the portal. Is it Wakanda or Asgard? It can't be that a Vinegar bottle in Kamatage fell over, right? Before Wang introduced, Ronan took the lead and stretched out his hand. Nice to meet you. Please take care of me. I'm Ronan, the next Sorcerer Supreme from a parallel world. Also, a very good friend of the king. Looking at Ronan's outstretched hand and the extremely bright smile on his face, Strange's face showed an indescribable sense of strangeness. He looked at the king on the side. The king seemed to want to explain something, but didn't know how to explain it. Because what Ronan said was not wrong. I guess you are the Sorcerer Strange that the king mentioned before. The boss. Chapter 28. When the skill is needed, it is regrettable. Ronan's words can be described as shrimp and pig heart. In a way, the Supreme Sorcerer is indeed the leader of all Kamatage mages. It's not a big problem to say that he is the boss. But the key issue is that Wang and Strange have a very good relationship. The relationship between the two is more of a friendship than a workplace relationship. Not to mention that when Strange joined Kamatage, it was Wang who taught him magic. Wan didn't expect that the trainee wizard he taught how to cast spells in the past would not only compete with him for the main attack, but even sit on the position of supreme sorcerer. Regarding this, Comrade Li Yunlong, who did not want to reveal his name in another world, had the same feeling. Well, I'm Strange. Wan's boss. Strange smiled slightly, but his eyes unconsciously drifted to Wang. It was like a little lover who had to try his best to maintain the other person's face in front of outsiders. Oh no, good friends. Speaking of which, you are worthy of being the supreme sorcerer. It's amazing that you can even control the levitation cloak. When I interacted with it before, it didn't want to be controlled by me at all. It just wanted to stick to me. Compared to you, this relationship is far worse. However, Ronan had not yet let Strange go, and took the initiative to praise Strange's cloak. Although this sounded like a compliment, Strange felt something was wrong, no matter how he listened. But, he didn't know what to say. Thank you, you are also a very good wizard. Strange pulled the corner of his mouth, and could only reply to Ronan like this. But the more he thought about Ronan's words, the more he felt something was wrong. What does it mean, to not want to be controlled by you, but just want to stick to you? Strange suddenly felt like he was running on the grassland, and was a minotaur. Okay, we are fighting now. What do you want to say? Let's talk after the battle is over. Wang interrupted the cordial exchange between the two people in time. Because he felt that, if they continued to communicate so cordially, one of them would fall to the ground first without Thanos saying anything. Ronan smiled, and under the gazes of several people, his feet slowly left the ground, and flew into the air. He can fly. Strange stared at Ronan's flying back, and then looked at Wang beside him. Why can't we fly? Don't look at me. Master Ancient One never taught us to fly. Wang's face also turned black. We are both mages of Kamatage. Why can you fly, while we can only walk? Also, you Strange are already very good, and you can fly with a cloak. My brother is a number 11 bus. If you want to jump higher, you have to use Kamatage's magic weapon. As for why Ronan can fly, if you have the ability, go ask Master Ancient One. Ronan did not see the communication between the two people. In fact, his ability cannot be regarded as flying, but only as simple floating. There is no doubt that Ancient One can definitely fly. There is no doubt about this. It's just that the flying technique is not as simple as it looks to outsiders, and it can fly up casually. This is also why no one else in Kamatage can fly. As for Ronan, he actually has a very good talent. Ancient One only taught him a few times, and he was able to float in the air. But he couldn't hold on for more than a few minutes before he had to land. Therefore, on the system panel, the skill of flying has never been recognized. Ronan landed gently beside Steve Rogers. Although he didn't intend to confront Thanos head on, in this case, he had to stand in the center, right? At least he could give him 2 more shots. Seeing so many troops gathered on Earth in an instant, Thanos' originally calm face also showed a hint of surprise. However, he hadn't waited for the ultimate move yet. Steve Rogers took a step forward and raised his right hand towards the distance. Avengers. With Steve Rogers' shout, everyone seemed to be bathed in a layer of buff. And the Meow Hammer also fell into Steve Rogers' hands. Assemble. As soon as these 2 words fell, the buffs were instantly added. Army combat effectiveness plus 100%. Army morale plus 100%. Enemy morale minus 50%. The entire army is in a state of enthusiasm, and the mental attributes are doubled. Although this was all Ronan's imagination, the scene was indeed too shocking. Except for the lack of background music, everything else could be said to be perfect. With Steve Rogers' order, the screams of war rang out instantly. The coalition forces composed of various armies rushed towards Thanos' army at the same time, with a deafening momentum. However, Thanos was not a pushover. After all, he had conquered so many planets, and had seen all kinds of scenes. In his eyes, these people were just struggling to survive. He raised the big knife in his hand, and issued an attack order. The various armies behind him also rushed towards the Avengers army at the same time. The battle started at this moment. Just as everyone was charging forward, Ronan flashed away, left the King's Division, and rushed into the Iron Division. It's not that he didn't want to play the King's Division, but he was afraid that the spectators would not understand his thinking. As for the Iron Division, It's normal for a 16-year-old high school student like him to play the Iron Division, right? Bang. Ronan turned on the fish frying mode in the crowd. The energy whip in his right hand shot out, rolled up a Chirita, and began to spin at high speed with himself as the center of the circle. Show me my original moves. Tornado destroys the parking lot. With Ronan's roar, the spinning Chirita began his own performance. One after another, the enemies were knocked away by this high-speed rotation, and the screams continued, which made people call it despicable. For a moment, the enemies couldn't get close to Ronan. They had to think of another way, long-range attack. So, following the order of someone unknown, the surviving enemies around all raised their guns and pointed them at Ronan. After a disagreement, they emptied the magazine. However, no one expected that Ronan would have a different move. It's not over yet. Let me show you the secret technique from the Hyuga clan. Golden Resurrection. The familiar ring of Ragador appeared in Ronan's left hand. However, this time the magic ring was completely different from the previous one. It was not only much larger, but also completely covered Ronan's side. Moreover, under Ronan's high-speed rotation, this magic ring actually formed an unbreakable defense shield. The crackling bullets hit the ring of Ragador, only causing a little ripple, and then bounced back. The remaining bullets, that luckily passed through the defense, were also dodged by Ronan in various difficult postures under the prompt of the observation color. For example, the posture of the wordwood. What made Thanos' army even more unacceptable was that these bullets that bounced back also injured some of their own people. Classic I hit myself. However, compared with their extremely angry mentality, Ronan was the one who was extremely excited. Because of the experience that was already swiping in front of him, he couldn't help but want to shout out. Experience plus 150, experience plus 200, experience plus 170, experience plus 140. Various numbers swiped from Ronan's eyes, but each number was not less than 3 digits. Occasionally, a prompt of experience plus 300 would pop up, which would also make Ronan's eyes light up. Use one word to describe Ronan's current state. Kill the gods and the Buddhas. Fish frying is so enjoyable. Now, Ronan feels extremely regretful. He didn't learn the 2 moves of Journey to Icon and Wind of Watem. It just delayed his experience. Journey to Icon created hundreds of him, and they all used the tornado to destroy the parking lot just now. How much experience would they gain? In addition, Wind of Watem combined with Ring of Regado. Isn't this a perfect Shinra Tensei? They are both powerful weapons for clearing the screen. Now, Ronan finally understands that sentence. You only regret not having enough skills when you need them. Chapter 29. Oh no, there's a cheat. Compared to Ronan's happy monster clearing behavior, the battlefield on the other side was not so easy. Thanos' strength was finally fully revealed. If we say that when the Avengers heroes first met Thanos, they were crushed by the Infinity Stones. Because of the Infinity Stones in Thanos' hands, they were defeated. This can also be regarded as an objective reason. But now, Thanos has no Infinity Stones, and with only his own abilities and combat experience, he has made many superheroes who besieged him daunted. It's ridiculously strong. Of course, for the heroes of the Avengers, although destroying Thanos is the focus, if the battle cannot be resolved quickly, then they have only another way to stop Thanos from destroying the world. Send the Infinity Stones back to their original place. Therefore, the Infinity Gauntlet inlaid with 6 Infinity Stones has become a hot commodity in everyone's eyes. Ronan is happily clearing soldiers and brushing the economy, but his teammates have already started to pull for the final decisive group. The very classic Infinity Stone chase has already begun. The Avengers used a very retro relay race mode. Hawkeye handed it to Black Panther, who rushed for a while, but was stopped by Thanos. However, a person who was destined to make Thanos lose face appeared. Scarlet Witch. Taking this opportunity, Black Panther quietly slipped away from behind Scarlet Witch. Very clever. On the other side, Tony Stark finally met Strange again. Hey, you said we have a 1 in 14 million chance of winning. Is it this time? Tony Stark finally asked this concerned question. Because from the current situation, the situation does not seem to be favorable for them. If I said it, it would not happen this time. Although Strange did not answer, his meaning was also very clear. They found this opportunity Tony Stark nodded, and just as he was about to leave, he turned his head again. Compared to that supreme sorcerer, I think your skill in guessing is a little bit worse. Keep it up. Then, in Strange's extremely confused eyes, Tony Stark flew into the sky again. On the battlefield, the passing of the Infinity Gauntlet continued. The burning sensation of the bomb instantly spread over the land, and the flames began to burn. Both Thanos' army and the Earth Alliance were involved in this fireworks show. I believe the people of the island country feel the same way. Fuck you. Ronan on the side couldn't help but spit out a Chinese curse. He watched the enemies around him being hit by shells and then die one by one. But he could only hold the secret door while using the secret door to transfer shells to get some experience and curse Thanos. Although the secret door was used to transfer shells to eliminate the enemy, the experience was less than before. This system is also stingy. How can it be killed? Why is the experience reduced? At this moment, Ronan's heart couldn't help but bleed. These are all experience packs. Thanos wasted them like this. It's so unscrupulous. Also, is there such a thing as counter-killing in this game? Or does it mean that, if the enemy can't get the economy, it means that Thanos has developed? So, your nickname is Little Shy Brother? Just as Ronan was heartbroken, Scarlet Witch, who had been beating up Thanos, was also hit by a cannonball, forcibly stopping the Thanos stripping plan. It seems that the goddess of luck doesn't want to see Thanos' naked body. Guys, there seems to be something going on here. At this time, the voice of Pepper Potts came from Ronan's headset. Of course, she also participated in this battle. The blue-painted rescue suit flew in the air, and Pepper Potts saw that the seaside began to change. The seawater is about to rush to the shore. Strange took a look at the surging water, and the wind of Watum was released from his hands. Great miracle to control water. However, it is a pity that Ronan did not see such a classic scene, because he was attracted by another picture. The spacecraft that was originally bombarding the ground now aimed all its fire at the sky. A large number of shells were all bombarded at the black clouds in the sky. For a moment, everyone else was stunned. But Ronan knew very well that another woman who could match Thanos had appeared. You know, whether it was Thor or Steve Rogers, they could only fight Thanos to a 50-50 score, and they could only last a few rounds at most. But Scarlet Witch was different from Captain Marvel. These two really beat Thanos when they met him. One almost stripped Thanos naked, and the other frequently met with Thanos to show friendship. Even the latter could suppress Thanos. It feels that female heroes are much more powerful than male heroes. While talking, Captain Marvel, who had changed her hairstyle, passed through the sky like a meteor that broke through the sky and crashed into Thanos' battleship in an instant. Boom. As the deafening sound spread across the earth, Thanos' battleship also burst into dazzling sparks. Everyone clearly saw that Captain Marvel forcibly inserted from the side of the battleship, causing an explosion, and flew out from the other side of the battleship. Then, from another angle, the same action was performed. Oh no, there is a cheat. Ronan spoke for Thanos. Even a strong man like Thanos rarely sees such a scene. Captain Marvel, who has absorbed the power of the Space Stone, is accustomed to such scenes. Ronan is no exception. At this moment, he almost drooled. If he could destroy such a large battleship as easily as the other party, the experience he could get would be soaring. Unfortunately, this is just a thought. After Thanos' indiscriminate bombing just now, those experience packs have been almost solved. The remaining few experience bigheads. Ronan couldn't help but look at Ebony Maw. And Thanos looked up at the sky. Thinking of this, Ronan took a deep breath. Deep blue. Oh no, system, add points. Today is the first day of the first round of recommendations. This round of recommendations almost determines the life and death of this book. So, if you have recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, etc., I hope you can vote a little more, which is very helpful for promotion. Thank you everyone. Chapter 30. Sorry, I also have a cheat. After the fish fry just now, Ronan was upgraded to levels. From the previous level 5, he has been upgraded to level 7. However, the stingy system gave him nothing, except 2 skill points. But these are not important. Ronan looked at his system. In his system, most of them are auxiliary spells, and there are only 2 real attack spells. One is the Ring of Ragada, which is mainly used for defense. But the use of spells cannot be conventional. When Ronan was killing the Chirita before, the Biu emitted was transformed from this spell. So, Ronan gritted his teeth and gave this basic skill a point. In an instant, the Ring of Ragada changed its appearance. Ring of Ragada +1. Both hands are in the shape of a shield, which can resist damage or attack. +1 features. The shield's defense is greatly improved. When encountering non-physical attacks, half of the attacks will be converted into pure energy for storage. The stored energy can be used within 1 minute to make a powerful attack. The attack effect is related to the amount of stored energy. Note, the non-physical attack absorbed cannot exceed the shield's defense, otherwise it cannot be stored. When Ronan saw the characteristics of the Ring of Ragador, he was a little confused. Isn't this a bit too outrageous? Is this still a spell of Kamatage? But thinking about the previous skills, Ronan was relieved. The Arcane Gate can even travel through time, and the Astral Projection can instantly kill souls weaker than himself. It makes sense that the Ring of Ragador can have such strength. However, this also disrupted Ronan's plan. Originally, according to Ronan's idea, he wanted to add all 2 points to the Ring of Ragador. However, seeing the effect after the upgrade, Ronan turned his attention to another spell, Energy Whip. Since the Ring of Ragador is enough for the time being, it is better to upgrade another one. Some people say that it is better to be proficient in one thing than to be proficient in everything. But others say that the more trump cards, the better, and it is best to never use them all. This obviously made Ronan a little entangled. But soon, he also made a decision. He chose to upgrade his trump card. According to his current configuration, even if he faced Thanos, he could fight him for several rounds. Even if he was defeated in the end, he had a way to escape. So, it would be better to give himself an extra trump card. Maybe there would be some unexpected surprises. System. Add points to Energy Whip. Ronan took a deep breath and made the final choice. Energy Whip +1. Condensed into an Energy Whip through magic, attacking the enemy. +1 features. The Energy Whip has enhanced toughness and can be separated from the hand and controlled by the caster's mental thoughts, but the distance cannot exceed 10 meters around the caster. Damn. This time, Ronan almost burst out with swear words. It can be separated from the hand and controlled by mental thoughts. Now, Ronan is extremely fortunate that he put 2 skill points on meditation at the beginning. Because of the enhancement of meditation, Ronan's mental power is obviously much stronger than that of ordinary mages. In the words of the Ancient One, Ronan's mental power has surpassed all the mages in Kamatage, and there is only a slight gap between him and her. Of course, Ronan doesn't know how big the slight gap that the Ancient One said is. However, Ronan's mental power at this time is definitely very strong. He's so terrifying. System. Although you are stingy, you are not that stingy. At this time, Ronan had already selectively forgotten his previous face. What? Someone also said that the system is stingy. No matter who it is, Ronan is the first to disagree. His system is extremely generous. When upgrading skills, it is not like squeezing toothpaste like some big factories. It really gives it when it has strength. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but glance at Thanos, who was still standing there and looking up at the sky. Skill points, the cutest skill points. Killing Thanos, he can at least upgrade to another level, right? Although he can't beat Thanos, it's not too much to follow other superheroes and grab ahead, right? Hehe. Thinking of this, Ronan even laughed out loud. Hey, Ronan, are you okay? Tony Stark stood behind Ronan without knowing when. He obviously heard Ronan's laughter, and the more he listened, the more creepy it became. It's okay, I don't eat Yoplum. Ronan regained his composure in a second. Huh. His answer stunned Tony Stark. What is Yoplum? Forget it, don't dwell on it. If you don't enjoy the fireworks in the sky and deal with Thanos, why do you come to me? Ronan also saw Tony Stark's doubts, but he didn't want to answer. How could he admit that he was a fan of the heroine in the Yoplum advertisement? He was a pure, 16-year-old, uncontaminated high school student. Okay, I just want to ask you, Are the futures you and Strange observed the same? Tony Stark took a deep breath. Ronan raised his eyebrows. It seems that he didn't get an answer from Strange, so he wanted to ask Ronan? Not necessarily, because we observe from different angles, so there will be some deviations. Are you curious about the future again now? Ronan looked at Tony Stark with a smile. He had used the future to lure him before, but Tony Stark refused it sternly at that time. Now, could it be that he is interested again? No, I just want to ask, is this future the only successful one that Strange said? Tony Stark shook his head. Although he already had the answer in his mind, he still wanted to confirm it again. Because they no longer have another chance. In this situation, either they die or Thanos dies. He doesn't want to end with their failure. What the future will be like depends on the choice of each of you. Just like now, you choose to send the Infinity Gauntlet back to various places, but what if the car is blown up? Again. If you don't open the box, you will never know whether the cat is alive. Ronan pointed to his brain and smiled slightly. Although he hated the Riddler the most in his life, he is also a Riddler. Because being a Riddler feels so good. Especially when he saw the blank expression on Tony Stark's face, Ronan couldn't help but want to laugh. The Riddler finally became the Riddler. So what you mean is that we need someone to open the box now? Or have we already opened the box? Tony Stark pondered for a few seconds and barely understood what Ronan said. However, Ronan shook his head. No, the box hasn't been opened yet, but the person who opened the box has appeared. Now, it depends on what choice the person who is about to open the box will make. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 31 Surprise, Sister? Tony Stark is gone. He is gone in a physical sense, not a physiological sense. Because he doesn't understand what Ronan wants to say, and he doesn't know who the person who opened the box is. So, he can only continue to fight. In fact, Ronan is not unable to reveal what the future will be like. It's just that, as Strange said, once it is said, the future may not appear. For example, tell Tony Stark from the beginning that your ending is death. Then invisibly, there will be another choice of box and cat. Either Tony Stark withdraws from this action, then his ending will be rewritten, but Thanos may not be stopped, and the future of this world will be completely overturned. Or, Tony Stark continues to participate in this action, and his future will follow the established order. Of course, if he does not choose to snap his fingers when he gets the glove, the future will change again. In any case, once the future is revealed, the impact is too great. Even in this timeline, Black Widow is not dead and is still fighting Thanos' army there. But whether Black Widow dies or not, it will not have such a big impact on the future. To put it bluntly, the so-called influence on the future only lies on a certain person at a certain node. At this node, the only person who has an impact on the future is Tony Stark. Of course, it is not ruled out that a situation suddenly occurs, that is, the Black Widow who is not dead inexplicably gets the Infinity Gauntlet. Then she snaps her fingers instead of Tony Stark. But the probability of this is too small, and those high-ranking people don't care. There are 50 great ways, 49 heavenly evolutions, and one of them is human escape. That's about it. Ronan can only be regarded as half understanding of these issues. After all, most of his mind is filled with mathematics, physics and chemistry, which is similar to Strange who just entered Kamatage. The only difference is that Ronan can accept both concepts. While talking, Thanos' spaceship finally couldn't maintain its flying state and fell heavily into the sea in the expectant eyes of everyone. It set off a huge wave. Daki, who controls water, has a new job again, and this time he also called everyone in Kamatage. And Thanos looked at the falling spaceship with heartache. It was as if he had bought this spaceship with a loan. Without the spaceship, it was highly unlikely that he would be able to return to the original timeline. Therefore, there was no hope of returning home. The instigator of all this, Captain Marvel, the leader of the demolition team and the one who became ugly when changing her hairstyle, was flying in the air, looking at Thanos on the ground from afar. The whole person's temperament was highlighted by one sentence. Brother, do you want to buy a cheat? It was unknown whether Thanos wanted to buy a cheat, but Ronan really wanted to. If he had this ability, wouldn't he be able to get rid of Thanos in a minute? Danvers, we need help. Finally, someone had not forgotten their ultimate goal. To send the Infinity Gauntlet back to each timeline. Without the Infinity Stones in the Gauntlet, Thanos' idea would only become a bubble. Therefore, Captain Marvel flew down from the sky and landed directly next to Peter Parker. At the same time, Ronan also flashed to the side. Who are you? Captain Marvel looked at Ronan with a flash of vigilance in his eyes. Ronan just shrugged and pointed at Steve Rogers over there, meaning to let him explain. Soon, Steve Rogers' voice rang out. Danvers, he brought the time stone, and he is one of us. Just this one sentence instantly dispelled the hostility of Captain Marvel. She looked at Peter Parker lying on the ground. Hey, I'm Peter Parker. Peter Parker, holding the Infinity Gauntlet and bleeding from his nose, looked at Captain Marvel. I don't know if he was amazed by this big sister. Maybe he likes big sisters at his age. Hello Peter Parker, do you have anything for me? Captain Marvel smiled slightly, and the temperament that belongs only to big sisters emerged spontaneously. Ronan raised his eyebrows on the side. No wonder Peter Parker in this world will eventually find MJ, Michelle Jones, as his girlfriend. To be honest, some of MJ's temperament is really similar to Captain Marvel. They are both the kind of people who can easily control Peter Parker. Can you handle it? Peter Parker stood up, glanced at the army of Thanos behind him, and couldn't help swallowing his saliva. After all, there are too many people on the other side. But just as he was talking, Valkyrie and Scarlet Witch fell from the sky. Of course, there were also Pepper Potts and the black girl from Wakanda whom Ronan didn't know. Oh, this is the real Avengers, right? Ronan narrowed his eyes. He had just complained that the combat power of female heroes was much higher than that of male heroes. Now it seems that he was right. Captain Marvel and Scarlet Witch alone have raised the upper limit of this team infinitely. Not to mention the Valkyrie and Iron Man from Asgard. This team is terrifying just to think about. Wait. Just when Captain Marvel was about to leave with the Infinity Gauntlet, Ronan stopped her. She looked at Ronan with some doubts and frowned. I don't mean anything else. I just want to confirm whether the time stone is okay. After all, my teacher specifically told me to bring it back unscathed. Ronan shrugged and pointed to the time stone on the Infinity Gauntlet. Although what he said was a bit strange, Steve Rogers had said before that the time stone was brought by Ronan. In other words, this stone was his private property. It was no big deal for someone to check his private property. So Captain Marvel handed the Infinity Gauntlet to Ronan. But at the same time, she was always on guard. After all, she had experienced that her closest comrade was actually an enemy. Ronan didn't care about her like this. Of course, it wasn't that Ronan was so generous, it was just that he simply couldn't beat her. Well, it's that simple. Picking up the Infinity Gauntlet, Ronan touched the location of the time stone and gently took it off. The time stone was intact. Under the watchful eyes of the Avengers, Ronan didn't do anything more, just put the time stone back again. Okay, I checked it, there's nothing wrong. Remember to tell Scott for me, and make sure to hand it over to my teacher in person. Ronan smiled slightly and returned the Infinity Gauntlet to Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel nodded, and the Avengers turned their guns and rushed to their destination, Scott Lang's van. Ronan tilted his head, and soon the scene that broke the hearts of countless Iron Man fans would appear. Thank you all for your tips and monthly tickets. I don't know what to say, so I'll just save more drafts. Chapter 32. I'm a professional at stealing heads. For Ronan, he could not observe the future at any time like the Ancient One. Everything he knew about the future was based on the plot. Now, the plot he experienced seemed to have undergone some subtle changes. For example, Ronan narrowed his eyes, and the energy whip appeared in his hand, then split into two parts, and surrounded his body. Peter Parker on the side was stunned. Wow, are you also a wizard? Just like Strange? Peter Parker did not mean to be shy at all. If Peter Parker without Spider-Man's clothes is a good baby, then he is a chatterbox and a child in a battlesuit. For Ronan, who is the same age as him. He obviously still has more common topics. Guess. Ronan showed him a mysterious smile, and at the same time his body left the ground and floated in the air. He is going to grab the head. In front of him, the female heroes of the Avengers have already fought with Thanos' army. Among them, Scarlet Witch and Valkyrie are aiming at the two giant guns. So, Ronan was going to grab their heads. The next second, his body soared into the sky and flew behind several people. Let me do it. You can go to support first. Leave this kind of trivial matter to me. Soon, Ronan flew behind the Scarlet Witch. The giant gun in front of her had been controlled by her chaos magic. The Scarlet Witch looked back at Ronan, showed him a grateful expression, and then rushed out. You see, she still has to thank me. Ronan swung out the energy whip around his body and instantly tied up the dying giant gun. It's a pity that this giant gun is not like a human, otherwise Ronan must let it try what is called tortoise shell binding. The bound giant gun let out a series of wails, and it fell from the sky with its movements restricted. The huge body hit the ground, forming a small-scale earthquake. But Ronan didn't pay attention to it, but aimed his eyes at the other side. Let me do it. Ronan shouted at the Valkyrie again. His body rushed forward again like an arrow from a bow. The Valkyrie riding on Pegasus was startled by Ronan's roar. The weapon in his hand also trembled. However, Ronan shouted a little too late. The giant gun had been cut in half from head to tail by the Valkyrie. With such skillful movements, I don't know if she worked in a slaughterhouse before. Looking at the other giant gun falling to the ground, Ronan was extremely heartbroken. This is all experience. He sighed, gently raised his left hand, and aimed at the bound giant gun, and clenched his left hand heavily. It's your bad luck. As his voice fell, the energy whip that bound the giant gun tightened inward at the same time, and the huge force instantly broke the layers of armor outside the giant gun. Although Ronan couldn't hear its screams, or see the splashing blood, he could be sure that the giant gun was dead. Because the system sent a prompt sound. Experience plus 1500 his. When he heard the system's prompt sound, Ronan couldn't help but take a breath. He covered his left atrium with his hands, and his legs could not help but step back 2 steps. Peter Parker was so scared that he held him. Are you okay? Peter Parker looked at Ronan's face and asked hurriedly. He thought Ronan was attacked by some invisible attack. No, I'm fine. Ronan almost gritted his teeth and said the 2 words I'm fine. This is 1500 experience points. If he moved faster, the giant gun of the Valkyrie would also become his bag. He lost 1500 experience points in vain. Based on the principle of not making money is losing, Ronan's face turned black, broke free from Peter Parker's support, and rushed forward again. The reason why he did this was because Thanos had destroyed Scott Lang's car. A huge energy shockwave, with the van as the center, suddenly exploded in all directions. All the people around, whether it was Thanos' army or the Avengers, were all blown away by this energy. However, Ronan did not stop his action, and the ring of Ragada appeared in his hands. The shockwave caused by this energy hit the shield hard. Ronan couldn't help but step back, but soon, he stabilized his position. A feeling he had never had before surged into his heart. He could clearly sense that a wave of energy was being stored in his body through the shield in his hand. But at the same time, this energy was not permanent. Although there was no countdown, Ronan could feel that it would not last long. Ronan's face lit up, and his eyes began to search for prey around him. Since he wanted to test the strength, he had to find the strongest one. The most important thing is that the strongest one has more experience. So, Ronan aimed his eyes at the Corvus glaive flying in the air. He was also affected by the energy shock. It's you. Ronan found this lucky audience, separated the shields in his left and right hands, and aimed the ring of Ragada in his right hand at the Corvus glaive who was falling freely in the air. The energy in his body quickly focused on the ring of Ragada in his right hand. Boom. As the energy gathered, a golden light quickly blasted towards General Grim Reaper. However, this was not the end. Not long after the golden light flew out, it turned into golden swords in the air, and instantly spread in all directions, forming an aerial encirclement of General Grim Reaper. The defenseless General Grim Reaper suddenly felt threatened. But in midair, he could only block his weapon in front of him, and hide his head behind his arms to reduce the damage. Unfortunately, the powerful energy sword directly smashed his weapon and then penetrated his entire body from his chest. Then, sword after sword pierced his body. Blood flowers bloomed in the air. Ronan stood in place, made a pistol gesture with his right hand, and blew air into his index finger. Peter Parker behind him widened his eyes and couldn't help but touch his chest. If he was it. Thinking of this, Peter Parker couldn't help but shudder. Don't think about it. Murphy's Law is not accurate. Bang. The body of General Corvus Glaive fell to the ground, and a crisp system prompt sounded. Experience plus 3000. You have leveled up. So cool. Ronan retracted his right hand with satisfaction, glanced at the empty experience bar, and couldn't help whistling. I have leveled up again. Unfortunately, there is no chance to gain experience this way. Just in that wave of explosions, Thanos has almost wiped out his army. Among the remaining people, only Ebony Maw can still catch Ronan's eye. The others are all scum. What's the name of this move? Peter Parker swallowed his saliva, and he didn't know what to say. Ronan raised his eyebrows, looked at Thanos who quickly approached the Infinity Gauntlet, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. This move is called Light Sealing Sword. How is it? Some people say that I always write Ring of Magic, which makes me look unprofessional, as if I have never seen a movie. I have to explain that the Ring of Magic is actually the Ring of Ragador. The reason why I didn't write the full name is that I felt like I was wasting words, so I use the Ring of Magic instead. If someone doesn't understand it because of this, I will change it back in the future. Finally, thank you all for your recommendation votes and monthly votes. Thank you very much. Chapter 33, Snapped Fingers, failed. Of course, Ronan was just playing a joke. It was normal that Peter Parker didn't understand. After all, there was no board game called Yu-Gi-Oh in this world. After all, the man who was revered as the Yu-Gi-Oh King had relied on this card to turn the tables several times. Ronan also wanted to borrow this kind of luck. As the two were talking, Thanos and Tony Stark were already wrestling together. The melee between them was very fierce, almost fist to flesh. You punched and I kicked, and Ronan couldn't help but grin. It hurts. It hurts too much. However, compared to close combat, even with the blessing of the Iron Suit, Tony Stark is still no match for Thanos. Soon, he was knocked out. Thor, who had been invisible for a long time, also rushed up, but he was also no match. Even with the blessing of the Thunder Axe and the Mjolnir Hammer, it was still blocked by Thanos with one hand. Ronan, who was standing aside and watching the show, couldn't help shaking his head. What a pair of brothers. The younger brother was mocked by Hulk, and the older brother couldn't beat Thanos. Is this the god of Asgard? Ronan's complaints were heard by Peter Parker. He couldn't help but frown. Is it time to complain now? We are already at a disadvantage. If Thanos gets the Infinity Gauntlet, we will all be finished. Soon, the scene that Peter Parker was more worried about appeared. Thanos used his headbutt stunt to knock Thor away directly. Then he threw Steve Rogers with a back throw and a face-breaking punch. At this time, there was no one around him. Thanos fumbled to pick up the Infinity Gauntlet, but before he could put it on, the woman with the cheat fell from the sky. She output to Thanos' face. However, Thanos was still Thanos. He found a flaw in Captain Marvel and threw her out. The next second, Thanos put on the glove. Just when he was about to snap his fingers, Captain Marvel appeared again and grabbed his right hand tightly. Bang, bang. Thanos used his ultimate move again, the headbutt attack. But this time, Captain Marvel smiled slightly, and it had no effect at all. Captain Marvel even flew up and wanted to punch Thanos again. The two punches just now had made Thanos feel Captain Marvel's strength, so this time, he did not take it hard, but took the power gem from the Infinity Gauntlet and punched Captain Marvel away. The battle seemed to be settled at this moment. Just as Thanos put the power gem back into the Infinity Gauntlet and his whole body was occupied by this huge power, Daki, who had been paddling, began to search among the crowd. The index finger of his left hand also rose slightly. However, what he never expected was that the protagonist he was looking for actually fainted. Tony Stark fainted not somewhere else, but next to a giant gun. Ronan slapped himself on the forehead. He seemed to be familiar with that giant gun. Judging from the 3-part corpse of the giant Kun, it seems that. Thinking of this, Ronan shifted his gaze to the other side and couldn't help but whistled. Peter Parker on the side was about to cry. Brother, why are you still whistling? Thanos is going to snap his fingers. Are you whistling to send me off for the last time? Finally, at this moment, Thanos adapted to this power, and the index finger and thumb of his right hand were pinched together. I am Destiny. Everyone looked at Thanos, who was posing, and the expression on his face showed that he was ashamed, because they couldn't stop Thanos. They struggled for so long, and finally failed. Just as Thanos finished this sentence, a crisp snap of fingers sounded. At this moment, everyone closed their eyes. The current scene, as if a nightmare was reappearing, reminded them of that day 5 years ago. On that day, the same snap of fingers made them lose their most important partners and family. Steve Rogers looked at Thanos' position with great despair. No matter how much pain he suffered physically, it was not as painful as the mental damage he suffered this time. Are they going to lose again? Thanos smiled. His dream of many years was fulfilled at this moment. This Earth will no longer be an obstacle to him, nor will it affect his conquest. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. At this moment, time seemed to stand still. Everyone was looking in Thanos' direction, especially his right hand wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. Peter Parker touched his body and began to talk nonsense. No, I still have Aunt May. No one is taking care of her yet. And MJ, and Ned, and many others. I really don't want to leave this world. He remembered the last time his body turned into ashes in the air and his consciousness dissipated. That was the most real experience before he stepped into the arms of death. But he didn't want to experience it again. Like him, many people were secretly sobbing. Many people who had just reunited with their relatives and friends shed tears of resentment. If they had tried harder, if they hadn't let Thanos get the glove. If. Unfortunately, it was too late. Ronan just crossed his arms and looked at the others around him quietly, especially when he saw Peter Parker's slightly exaggerated performance. He couldn't help but sigh. Peter, I wish you a good journey. I will help you take care of MJ, and I will take care of your wife. As he said that, he also reached out and patted Peter Parker on the shoulder with an extremely sad expression. Peter Parker was in tears, with the anxiety of dying and the reluctance to Ronan's words. What do you mean you will take good care of MJ? Why don't you take care of other people? Peter Parker took a deep breath and planned to give a speech before his death. However, before he could speak, he was stopped by the voice in the headset. Guys, calm down. Thanos' snap doesn't seem to be successful. Did anyone disappear around you? Tony Stark's voice sounded in the headset. At some point, he woke up from his coma and learned about this from Friday. Hearing this, Peter Parker, who was originally filled with grief and anger, touched his body in panic. Nothing. Then, he looked at the others. The familiar flying ash did not appear, and everyone stood there intact. Guys, it's not possible that all of us are so lucky that we all survived the snap, right? Has anyone contacted the others? Tony Stark continued. Originally, when he learned about this from Friday, he was almost desperate, but he soon discovered the blind spot. None of the people standing here disappeared. Could it be that they were so lucky this time? Guys, I don't think we have to think about it. Look over there. Steve Rogers' reminders are always so timely. Everyone looked at Thanos again. Thanos looked around in some surprise. Obviously, he didn't expect that things were different from what he thought. Obviously, when he snapped his fingers, he had already thought of the idea. But why didn't anything happen? He was a little at a loss. However, at this moment, Captain Marvel rushed forward again and punched Thanos, who was stunned. What are you waiting for? Let's go together. Chapter 34 Ebony Maw. Following Steve Rogers' words, everyone seemed to wake up and started to attack Thanos again. One after another, it was like playing a team dungeon in a game. Facing a boss that was much higher than them, their team began the second exploration. After all, the first time they were almost wiped out. Moreover, in the east across the ocean, there has always been a saying. Let's fight together, and don't let this evil demon go. Now they, the Avengers, are the righteous, and Thanos is the evil demon. It is impossible to fight one-on-one. On the other side, Ronan narrowed his eyes. He did not focus on Thanos, but looked at Ebony Maw not far away. Thanos, who has the Infinity Gauntlet, is definitely not something that can be taken down in a short time. Even if he wants to kill him, he has to wait until he appears at the end. So before that, Ronan doesn't mind competing with Ebony Maw. After thinking about it, Ronan's figure disappeared in an instant and came directly to the opposite side of Ebony Maw. You can't figure out why. Looking at Ebony Maw, who was still thinking, Ronan smiled. No matter what, Lord Thanos will definitely kill you all one by one. When the time comes, we will find a way. Ebony Maw is obviously very confident in Thanos. In fact, there is nothing wrong with what he said. With Thanos' current state, plus the Infinity Stones in his hand, the chance of winning is still very high. However, Thanos was almost deprived of the Infinity Gauntlet last time. If it weren't for Star-Lord's world-destroying punch, there would be no current events. I'm afraid you won't see it. Ronan shrugged, and the energy whip appeared in his hands. Looking at Ronan like this, Ebony Maw also tilted his head. I'm afraid your strength is not as good as that cloaked wizard. If you want to die, then I will fulfill your wish. After saying that, Ebony Maw raised his hands, and the stones on the ground floated one after another. He raised his right index finger, and the flying stones immediately turned into conical spikes. Seeing this, Ronan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Has anyone told you that, if you use this trick in elementary school, it will be very popular with children? After all, sharpening pencils is a very difficult thing for them. However, Ebony Maw did not accept Ronan's suggestion, but just waved his right hand, and the spikes around his body attacked Ronan. Ronan shook his head, and he didn't know how to be kind. A secret door appeared in front of him, swallowing up the spikes in an instant. The next second, another secret door appeared behind Ebony Maw. The target of the spikes became Ebony Maw's back. You mages, don't you know how to change your moves? Ebony Maw didn't even look back, and a huge stone flew from behind him, blocking the spikes. Ronan shrugged his shoulders. It seemed that the opponent easily caught Strange, and he also had contemptuous thoughts about the mages of Kamatage. It's all Strange's fault. However, despite saying so, Ronan's movements were not slow. Energy whips appeared out of thin air around his body, and then quickly flew towards Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw was not to be outdone. The stones under his feet flew up again, turning into various weapons, and instantly entangled with Ronan's energy whip. At this time, Ronan's body bounced up quickly, and he came to Ebony Maw in one step. Take my punch. Bang. Ronan's punch was blocked by Ebony Maw's hand, and he even tilted his head to show that Ronan's attack was too weak. However, Ronan smiled. The energy whip behind him disappeared out of thin air, and the next second it appeared in Ronan's hands, directly wrapped around Ebony Maw's right arm. Ebony Maw was stunned, but Ronan would not give him a chance to be stunned. He pulled out his right hand, supported the ground with his left foot, drew a semicircle in the air, and then kicked Ebony Maw out with a whip kick. Ebony Maw wanted to block it, but a huge force came from his right hand. He twisted his raised right hand behind his back. Even his left hand was entangled. It was the energy whip. However, when Ebony Maw figured it out, he had already flown more than 10 meters away. With the idea of taking advantage of your weakness, Ronan put his hands together, and then rotated his palms 90 degrees in the opposite direction. Two golden wheels appeared in his hands. Take my blow. Prince's fighting method. Ronan shouted. His body flew into the air, and his hands began to wave forward continuously. One after another, small regatta rings flew towards Ebony Maw. Boom. The continuous explosions attracted the attention of many people. Whether it was the gorgeousness of the moves or the deafening roar, it seemed that Ronan's fight was undoubtedly much more beautiful than the scene of the heroes fighting Thanos on the other side. Especially Ronan's Prince's fighting method. It was inherited from Vegeta, but there was still a little difference. Every time Vegeta used this move, the result was basically smoke without injury. As for Ronan, swish. Ronan dodged a huge spike from behind. His observation haki reminded him again. This sudden attack also interrupted his princely fighting method. When the smoke gradually dissipated, Ebony Maw appeared in his eyes again. But this time, Ebony Maw looked a little embarrassed. He held the stone wall in front of him, and his clothes were torn in many places. There were even deep wounds on many parts of his body, and blood was flowing non-stop. Fortunately, seeing this scene, Ronan couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It's okay to learn the moves, but he still didn't learn the feature of smoke without injury. He is not a Saiyan who can become stronger by being beaten. It seems that I really underestimated you. I didn't expect that you are much stronger than that mage. Ebony Maw wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his left hand, and then moved his right arm. A sharp pain made him gasp. When his right arm was forcibly bent back just now, it was already out of place. Now, caca. Ebony Maw covered his right shoulder with his left hand, and then rubbed it twice. The clear sound of bones made Ronan unable to recognize his teeth. It is said that men should be a little cruel to themselves. But is this too cruel? After doing all this, Ebony Maw looked at Ronan. A hint of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. But in this hint of ruthlessness, there was also some vigilance. After all, Ronan's methods are still very special, isn't it? He only knows how to raise his index finger and control the water. He can't do anything else. Ronan nodded in agreement. He agreed with Ebony Maw's pertinent evaluation. Of course, these are all said by Ebony Maw, not Ronan. But your end is still death. Next, let me show you my trick. Ebony Maw closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened his eyes again, there was no eyeball in his eye sockets, replaced by a blue light. A huge mental force came out of his body. Next, see Hell. Thank you for your recommendation and monthly votes. I got up late today, so I didn't update at home. My boss went out just now, so I took advantage of the time to update this chapter for everyone. I didn't check for typos. If there are any typos, please forgive me, and I will correct them when I get home tonight. Chapter 35. I didn't expect it. I have too many cards up my sleeve. How to say it? Ronan was careless. It doesn't mean anything else. It's just pure carelessness. He never thought that in the movie of his previous life, even when he died, Ebony Maw didn't use his ultimate move. And his ultimate move is more terrifying than many people imagine. Because Ronan only felt that his eyes were blurred and the whole person came to a very unfamiliar place. And the Ebony Maw in front of him has completely changed. He has become a very handsome middle-aged man, wearing a black suit with 3 parts of sneer, 3 parts of coldness, and 4 parts of indifference on his face. It's exactly like a pie chart. How about it? Are you satisfied with my dress? I put together such an appearance according to the most favorite looks of you earthlings. Ebony Maw opened his hands and posed in a pose that he thought was very handsome. Ronan rolled his eyes. He never thought that Ebony Maw would have such a conceited side. But to be honest, his face is really handsome. There is also a bit of the meaning of a suit thug. Even though Ronan is not gay, he is only slightly worse than himself. Although you are handsome, I want to say that I still like women. Especially those white and big women. Do you understand? Ronan sighed. It seems that Ebony Maw still doesn't understand men on Earth. For those men who are not married and have no girlfriend, they should be tempted by hot beauties. For those men who are already married, they should be given a good rest by gentle women. After all, the latter are pitiful enough after getting married. If you don't want to run away before marriage, you can't run away after marriage. Is that so? Then this look, or this look. Ebony Maw seemed to be inspired, and his whole image began to change. Pepper Potts. I don't know why Ebony Maw first chose Pepper Potts. Ronan rolled his eyes. What does Pepper Potts have to do with being white and big? Then, he became Captain Marvel? Hiss. Forget it, forget it. Ronan shook his head frantically. He can't beat this one under the bed, and he may not be able to beat him on the bed. After all, 30 is like a wolf, 40 is like a tiger, and 50 is like nothing. Are you not satisfied with these beauties? Well, it seems that you like this kind. Ebony Maw thought carefully, and the whole person turned into a woman in red. Hiss. In just a few seconds. This was the second time Ronan took a breath of cold air, but each time the psychological change was different. The last time was the fear of Big Mom. This time it was really unexpected. Ebony Maw turned into Scarlet Witch, and it was a naked version. Damn it. Ronan almost cursed. Although Ronan didn't know how many times he had seen that version of Scarlet Witch, it was really the first time that she stood in front of him so obviously. Besides, the Scarlet Witch in this world is a married woman. A married woman. Everyone cursed Boss KO back then, but no one expected that everyone would be Boss KO later. Enough, enough. Put on your clothes. I'm not that kind of person. Ronan glanced at her righteously and then turned his head to the other side. Although his head turned away, he always felt that his eyes were still there. Hiss. So white. TSK, according to my original idea, as long as you want, I can fulfill your wish before I die. It's a pity that now it seems that you seem to be dismissive of my kindness. Ebony Maw shrugged, and suddenly a turbulent sea surged. Ronan took a deep breath and tried to calm his restless, uneasy young heart. Oh, not just the heart. But he had no choice. He was only 16 years old. What was wrong with him? So, before I die, aren't you going to explain to me where we are? I have never been to this place before. Ronan glanced around, and from the corner of his eyes, he found that Ebony Maw had returned to his original appearance. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was sure that he didn't feel lost just now. Not at all. It's okay to tell you. This place is actually your spiritual world. Look above your head. Doesn't it look like a beautiful night sky? Ebony Maw raised his head and took a deep breath, as if he really liked the environment here. Night sky? Ronan looked up and saw a few twinkling stars in the sky. Those twinkling stars represent the strength of your spiritual power. For an ordinary person's spiritual world, lighting up one star is already very powerful. Like that Thor, although his body is very strong, his spiritual power can only appear 3 or 4 stars at most. And you, as he spoke, Ebony Maw looked at the twinkling stars in the sky. His eyes became brighter and brighter. And you actually have 5. If it weren't for my years of practice, I'm afraid I might not be your opponent. Ebony Maw opened his hands, and 9 stars lit up above his head. The number was almost twice that of Ronan. Ronan looked at the comparison of the numbers on both sides with a strange look on his face. He glanced at Ebony Maw, and then at the top of his head. So, your spiritual power is twice as strong as mine, right? Ronan asked weakly. That's right. Although your spiritual power is strong, mine is stronger. Soon, your spiritual world will be completely assimilated by me under my erosion. At that time, you will have the honor of becoming my puppet, and you will also become a member of Thanos. Don't worry, this process will not be painful at all, and you will not feel anything. Ebony Maw smiled. The pie chart at the beginning appeared on his face again. Hearing this, Ronan seemed to be relieved. So that's how it is. Why didn't you say it earlier? I was worried for a long time just now. I don't even have the mood to look at that thing. Ronan curled his lips. He seemed very dissatisfied with Ebony Maw, and his attitude was obviously unacceptable to Ebony Maw. You are about to die. Moreover, you will become my puppet after you die. How can you be so calm? However, Ronan quickly answered this question for him. Ronan took a deep breath and slowly turned his neck and wrists, as if doing a warm-up exercise. Today, I will teach you 2 life truths. One is that villains die because they talk too much. Ronan stretched his body. After stretching, Ronan raised his hands and clapped his hands gently. In the puzzled expression on Ebony Maw's face, he saw that there were rays of light above Ronan's head. These rays of light seemed to penetrate through layers of obstacles and finally appeared in front of outsiders. Ebony Maw widened his eyes, as if he saw an extremely terrifying scene. Above Ronan's head, those rays of light finally turned into stars one after another, and actually illuminated Ronan's half. The second one is people should hide their trump cards. The more the better. In this way, you can appreciate the wonderful expression of the opponent before he dies. Just like you now. Oh, there are too many drafts saved, and I even forgot the specific plot before. The plot of Avengers 4 is over, and I'm almost done with the second plot. When I go back to write new chapters, sometimes I can't even figure out the chapter names. It's really hard for me. If the editor didn't allow me to update twice a day, I would have written 10,000 pages a day during the new book period. Forget it. I won't say more. Please give me some recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 36 Send you away with youth. At this moment, Ronan was extremely glad that he had added 2 points to meditation. He had made this choice because he listened to what Ancient One said. Although mental power seemed useless, it was the foundation of a mage. It might save his life someday. At that time, Ronan also believed Ancient One, so he added 2 points to meditation. Of course, the nonsense he said before about regretting adding points to meditation was just a waste of time. If anyone dares to say that meditation is useless in the future, Ronan will be the first to fight them. SKR. What kind of monster are you? Impossible. This is impossible. Ebony Maw pointed at the top of Ronan's head, no longer in his previous free and easy and confident state. And the pie chart on his face now has only one category. Shocked. If he knew some knowledge of novels, he could almost use one sentence to summarize Ronan's current state. This kid is so terrifying. Well, although I usually hate the trick of pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger, but the reason is that I'm too weak. When my strength is strong enough and the opponent points fingers at me because he didn't notice this, I suddenly understand why pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger is so popular. Ronan shrugged his shoulders. He imitated Ebony Maw's initial behavior and put his hands in his pockets. I have to say, this kind of pretending is really cool. And I never get tired of pretending. No wonder there are so many TV dramas about domineering CEOs in the past life. In a way, pretending is addictive. You for a moment. Ebony Maw didn't know what to say. However, Ronan didn't mean to indulge him. Bang. There was only a muffled sound. Ebony Maw felt a pain on his left face, and the whole person flew out directly. I don't know when Ronan came in front of him and even made a punching posture. Ronan shook his right hand. His junior high school physics teacher told him that the action of force is mutual. It still hurts to hit someone with a fist. So, Ronan planned to change his method. But I have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I really wouldn't have found such a fun place. So, in order to repay you, I decided to use all the big moves I learned in my life to beat you up. After saying that, Ronan smiled slightly, and his body began to change like Ebony Maw. His hair turned into yellow hair, and his clothes turned into a black kimono. On his chest, 2 intersecting black lines could be vaguely seen. What made Ebony Maw even more confused was that Ronan took out a black longsword from somewhere and carried it on his shoulder. The blade of the longsword could even reflect Ebony Maw's terrified face. First of all, it is a gift from the god of death. A blue light burst out from Ronan's body. The light with huge momentum made Ebony Maw feel that it was difficult to breathe. He wanted to escape, but he couldn't. He was familiar with this move and knew very well that as long as he used this move, there would be only one ending. One died and became a puppet, and the other could live. Judging from the current situation, the puppet may be bang. The blue light rushed straight into the sky, and it seemed to penetrate the sky above their heads. Ronan no longer wanted to give Ebony Maw a chance to reflect. He held the knife in his right hand and pulled it towards the left and back, and his left hand also stroked the back of the knife. Crescent. Sky rush. A huge amount of energy rushed into the sky, and the black sword carried this energy and directly blasted Ebony Maw away. On this day, Ebony Maw finally experienced what it meant to catapult and take off. The blue knife light cut through the sky, and along with Ebony Maw's screams, it turned into a bright moon in the sky. However, Ronan's actions did not stop. Next, it's the form from the pirate. As Ronan said every word, his body began to change dramatically again. The original black kimono had disappeared, revealing Ronan's 8 abdominal muscles that he had trained for many years. The lower body was replaced by red shorts. The yellow hair also turned into white semi-long hair, like a blazing flame, floating in the air. A streamer wrapped around Ronan's neck and armpits. His pupils also changed. Take my blow, Rubber King Cobra. Ebony Maw, who was already seriously injured, couldn't see Ronan's movements at all. He only saw a black afterimage breaking through the sound barrier and rushing towards him in the sky. In a trance, he seemed to see a giant king cobra. Bang! The black afterimage directly pierced his abdomen, and with Ebony Maw's body, it rushed into the sky again. Puff! Ebony Maw spit out a mouthful of blood, and the severe pain had swept through his nerves. Under such a terrifying attack, he couldn't make any defensive moves at all. He couldn't even see Ronan's moves. Is this your spiritual world? Ebony Maw widened his eyes and looked at the bright starry sky above Ronan's head. At this time, his mumbling seemed to have become his deepest obsession. He never thought that such powerful moves would be hidden in Ronan's spiritual world. Where did these moves come from? Why has he never encountered this? However, Ebony Maw could only take this question to hell. Do you think this is the end? Originally, this punch could easily shatter your internal organs, but I didn't do it. The reason is also very simple. I still have one last trick. Ronan looked at Ebony Maw in the sky, and his body began to change for the last time. The floating white hair gradually fell down and once again turned into the yellow color of a bad boy. A windbreaker that Ebony Maw had never seen before appeared on Ronan's body. A few words slowly appeared behind the white windbreaker. The seventh Hokage. Ronan stretched out his hands, and a forehead protector representing youth appeared in his hands out of thin air. He picked up the forehead protector and tied it on his forehead. At the moment of tightening the forehead protector, Ronan's whole person underwent a shocking change. The next second, the white windbreaker began to burn, and a huge golden energy instantly included Ronan's entire body. One after another black lines outlined the surface of the clothes. A necklace made of golden Nagatama appeared on Ronan's chest, and a golden circle appeared on his abdomen. Roar. In the silent night sky, there seemed to be a roar of a demon beast. Ronan tilted his head and closed his eyes. He seemed to miss this feeling. But after a moment, he opened his eyes. Go, Kurama. With Ronan's whisper, the golden flame burned violently again. The madly burning flame turned into an extremely huge golden fox at this moment. The 9 golden tails already explained its name. Next, the last move. Send you to the west. At this moment, Ronan, like a middle school boy, pointed his right index finger at the falling Ebony Maw in the sky, and the golden 9-tailed beast opened its mouth. A purple black-tailed beast jade condensed in an instant. Ronan raised his head slightly, and a blue vortex appeared in his left hand at the same time. You should feel honored to be sent away with my youth. Tail Beast Ball Shuriken. Please vote for recommendation, monthly vote, and follow me. I woke up early in the morning feeling uncomfortable all over. It's another day of not wanting to go to work syndrome. Chapter 37 Backstab of Justice. When Ronan opened his eyes again, he was back to the familiar battlefield. Thanos and the Avengers were still fighting, but from the looks of it, Ronan seemed to have been away for a short time. In just a moment, he seemed to have returned from heaven to the mortal world. The power that could control everything before also disappeared. TSK Ronan looked at his hands and couldn't help smacking his lips. The sense of difference was really not good. After all, he was like an omnipotent god before. And when he returned to the real world, he was like a pure Iron 5 in comparison. What made him even more unacceptable was that when he released his ultimate move, he actually forgot to turn on the speakers. This is one of the 3 major comics for civilian workers. With BGM, his combat power can be increased by at least 50%. Experience plus 3000. You fought a battle in the spiritual world and successfully defeated the opponent. In this battle, you have some understanding of the use of mental power. Please explore the specific changes yourself. The system prompt sound rang soon. But when he heard this prompt sound, Ronan almost screamed out in fear. It was not because of anything else, but because of his arrogant system, which typed so many words this time. He suddenly felt flattered. But soon, Ronan's body shuddered. This rubbish system, could it be pooing him? He had been so arrogant before, but now suddenly, so many words popped up, just like a goddess treating a dog who was about to leave. Hello, hello, hello. Are you there? Are you there? Ronan asked without shame. Well, the word was used correctly. He was asking without shame. I'm here. What's wrong? The sudden reply startled Ronan. But immediately, Ronan rolled his eyes. Because it was not the system that replied to him, but the boy who liked big sisters who had been standing behind him. Peter Parker. I said you don't go to help. Why are you standing behind me? Aren't you also a member of the Avengers? Ronan looked at Peter Parker unhappily. Although his aunt was very beautiful and sexy, this was not a reason for Ronan to spoil him. Unless he was his no. There is no unless. Ronan quickly calmed down. I haven't had time yet. Don't you need to see that alien? After all, you were fighting a life and death battle just now. Why don't you fight now? Peter Parker pointed at Ebony Maw, who was still standing opposite him, looking very puzzled. As he said, just a few seconds ago, the two were even enemies who fought to the death. But now, both of them seem to have no intention of fighting. Others may not feel this, but Peter Parker with spider sense can feel it. At least on Ebony Maw, there is no hostility. Maybe he is impressed by my temperament. Ronan smiled, and Ebony Maw on the opposite side seemed to hear this, and smiled in Ronan's direction. This action obviously shocked Peter Parker. Did I see it right? Just now, the two seemed to have a grudge against each other for killing their husbands, so why did it become like this now? Could it be that what Ronan said was true? Why, you don't believe it? Then let him show you a magic trick. Go help Thanos. After saying that, Ronan raised his head in the direction of Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw received the order, bowed slightly to Ronan, and then flew directly towards the battlefield without saying a word. At this moment, Peter Parker's face was full of white question marks. A 15 or 16-year-old head could not contain such shocking things. And, more importantly, what order did Ronan just give? Do you believe it now? How about you try it too? It will make you stronger. At this moment, Ronan was like a demon who tempted ignorant teenagers to fall. As long as one step is wrong, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Hearing this, Peter Parker shook his head like an electric fan. The mutant spider gave him a physical fitness that surpassed that of ordinary people, which was undoubtedly revealed. Even Peter Parker shook his head and quietly moved his feet back. Obviously, he did not intend to accept Ronan's kindness. TSK Ronan's disappointed look was even more terrifying in Peter Parker's eyes. He didn't even dare to look at Ronan again, for fear that he would become like Ebony Maw. After teasing Peter Parker, Ronan set his sights on the battlefield again. Ebony Maw said, "Lord Thanos, I'll help you." He broke through the blockade of several superheroes and joined the battle. As for Thanos, he was already surrounded by everyone and showed some fatigue. Even though he was a member of the Eternals, and even though he had superb combat power. However, a good tiger cannot stand up to a pack of wolves, not to mention that there are several very strong alpha wolves in this pack of wolves. For example, Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch, etc. Seeing this, Ronan couldn't help but pull the corner of his mouth. The more he said it, the more embarrassed he felt. When will these male heroes of the Avengers really stand up? Why is it that in this instant, it seems to have returned to the matriarchal society? This is a decisive battle between men with swords and guns. Why is your output so low? Snap. Ronan heard a crisp snap of fingers. No need to think. This must be Thanos, who has not given up and is secretly snapping his fingers there. When they heard Thanos' second snap of fingers, the people who were fighting paused in unison. That feeling of panic appeared again. If God blessed them the first time, Thanos' plan to snap his fingers failed. What if he succeeded this time? But what Thanos couldn't accept was that his second snap still didn't bring any changes. If he hadn't seen Nebula's memory, Thanos would really think that the legends were all lies. What 6 Infinity Stones gathered together, they would have the power to destroy the world. Liar, a bunch of liars. Now, Thanos wanted to smash all these gems. Thinking of this, Thanos was stunned for a moment. At this moment of daze, he was knocked away by Captain Marvel's punch. Ebony Maw instantly used his mind control ability, and the surrounding boulders flew up one after another, blocking the superheroes who were planning to besiege him. And he flew to Thanos' side and helped Thanos up. Lord Thanos, are you okay? Ebony Maw looked very nervous. Thanos took a deep breath, shook his head, and turned his eyes to the people who surrounded them. Ebony Maw, help me resist them. I want to destroy this planet completely. Thanos said, with a crazy expression on his face. At this time, he already had another plan in his mind. Since he couldn't use the Infinity Stones to make a wish, he might as well borrow these stones to completely destroy this planet. Even if the power is not that great, at least all these people must die. This is also his last resort. However, in the next second, puff. At the same time, behind Thanos, the legendary backstab of justice appeared. Ebony Maw's right hand directly pierced Thanos' back. The position was exactly where Thanos' heart was. Backstab from justice. Ebony Maw, also known as Little Black Zetsu. It is said that the first round of recommendations seems to have been promoted, and it seems that it will be promoted to the second round this weekend. Thank you for your recommendation votes and monthly votes, which are the most critical for my promotion. Thank you all. I can't post more chapters now. Everyone just wait for the release. As long as I don't die, I will update to death. Go, go, go. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 38 Uchiha, Thanos. That's right, the Avengers superheroes were not wrong. Thanos suffered a righteous backstab from his subordinates. And it was when Thanos was at his most vulnerable, helpless, and difficult to accept. The superheroes surrounding Thanos all widened their eyes, and for a moment they dared not accept this scene. Friday, do you think they are acting? Tony Stark even began to communicate with Friday. According to computer calculations, the place where Thanos was hit was the heart. Judging from the injury, Thanos should have been shot through the heart. The probability of acting is very low. Friday's answer also made Tony Stark full of question marks. What on earth happened? Could it be that, just like in those movies, Ebony Maw has always been oppressed by Thanos? Or his family was killed by Thanos? So, he has been looking for an opportunity to take revenge. Now it's finally time. Such a bloody plot. Could it really be staged? Tony Stark raised countless questions in his heart. Of course, not only he couldn't figure it out, but Thanos, one of the parties involved, couldn't figure it out at all. How could Ebony Maw betray him? How dare he betray me? And he has no reason to do so. Thanos couldn't figure it out. For this, a white-haired laughing man in a certain ninja world has a lot to say. Although he couldn't figure it out, Thanos still roared to the sky. He turned around suddenly, and with his right hand wearing the Infinity Gauntlet, he grabbed Ebony Maw's head. The power gem on the Infinity Gauntlet began to glow. Bang! There was only a muffled sound. Ebony Maw's head was directly crushed by him, like a fragile raw egg. Ho ho, ho. As Ebony Maw's right hand that pierced Thanos' chest fell, Thanos also made a hoarse panting sound. It seems that he is about to run out of energy. Seeing him like this, everyone did not step forward to deal with Thanos. After all, Thanos still had the Infinity Gauntlet in his hand. On the other side, Ronan's feet softened, and he almost collapsed to the ground. If Peter Parker hadn't supported him in time, Ronan would really have fallen flat on his face. Are you okay? Peter Parker asked, looking at Ronan's slightly pale face. Looking at Ronan's state and Ronan's pale face, those who don't know would think that Ronan has kidney deficiency. It's okay. Ronan gritted his teeth. He didn't expect this to happen. At the moment Ebony Maw died, he felt that he was hit by a heavy hammer. This heavy hammer did not hit his body, but his spirit. The mental power that he controlled Ebony Maw was crushed together with Ebony Maw. The pain in an instant made Ronan want to curse a few words. At the same time, he had to greet the relatives of the System family. He also understood why the System said please explore on your own. This has a price. With the help of Peter Parker, Ronan stood up tremblingly. It looked like he had fought for a day and a night, and his legs were shaking. However, the pain was only in an instant, and now Ronan has begun to recover slowly. But the lost part of the mental power can never come back. With this time, Ronan will remember. Who knows if this happens too often, will he be turned into an idiot in the end? No, stop him. Just as Ronan stood up, Captain Marvel shouted from the battlefield over there. She keenly felt that Thanos was mobilizing the power of a large number of Infinity Stones. However, she realized it a little too late. Too late. Everything is too late. Thanos struggled to stand up, ignoring his bleeding chest, and raised his right hand high. On the Infinity Gauntlet on his right hand, several Infinity Stones burst out dazzling light at the same time. Even Tony Stark, who was not sensitive to this mysterious energy, seemed to feel the strong suffocation in the air. Just like the last time. The memory of death began to suddenly attack Tony Stark. On Titan, he watched Peter Parker and others turn into ashes and disappear from the world. Then, He was accidentally discovered by Captain Marvel and finally returned to Earth. This time. I was stopped by you last time. This time you have no chance. Although I can't fulfill my wish, at least on this planet, you will get my promise. Thanos looked at the people in front of him, and his mentality was unbalanced at the moment. If it is said that the previous Thanos was a man with a dream, his dream was to collect the infinite gems and then destroy half of the people in the universe. But now this dream is broken. I don't know why. After the infinite gauntlet snapped its fingers, there was no change at all. So, he blackened. Stop him. Steve Rogers shouted and rushed up by example. But he held up the half-broken shield, which looked a bit desolate. Let's enjoy it after the battle. Everyone took out their best skills and started to output to Thanos. However, at this moment, Thanos did not mean to dodge at all, but laughed crazily. This laugh sounded familiar to Luo Nan. Will Thanos join the Uchiha full laughing heroes after being backstabbed? Luo Nan couldn't help but shudder. At the moment, when Thanos laughed wildly, an extremely huge energy suddenly burst out from his left hand. Several different colors burst out completely and merged into one at this moment. A colorful light rushed straight into the sky. In an instant, this light pierced through the dark clouds above his head, and even the sky seemed to have been blasted into a black hole. This is the power from the Infinity Stones. The huge shockwave directly bounced all the attacks away. Even the surrounding Avengers heroes were blown away by this power. Of course, as the first person to come into contact with this power, Thanos was already in great pain at this time. The huge energy tore his body apart, and he could feel that there was an extremely brutal force raging everywhere in his body. Now, he didn't have to care whether the collision of the Infinity Stones would kill him, because with his current physical signs, death is a matter of time. Before that, he still had to fulfill his original promise. Boom. A deafening roar sounded. With Thanos' right hand as the center, a huge force that could destroy the world erupted instantly. At this moment, the world seemed to be destroyed. This planet. Disappear with me. Chapter 39 didn't expect that I still have a trump card. At this moment, the sky and the earth changed color, and the sun and the moon lost their light. The earth began to crack with huge cracks, and the surging sea water also evolved into a tsunami, raising a huge wave, rushing to the ground like a mountain and sea. The only light left in the sky was also completely covered. At this moment, they seemed to be at the end of the world, about to face the last time of mankind. Everyone's face showed a desperate expression. Even Steve Rogers, who has always been regarded as a spiritual leader, seemed to have given up struggling at this moment. Did he fail? It seems that he failed. They had thought of countless consequences of failure, including death, of course. But when this consequence really appeared, no matter who it was unacceptable. Fate seemed to have dealt them a heavy blow at this moment. This blow was enough to completely shatter them. Tony Stark was stunned in place. At the moment of the explosion, he thought of many things. He thought of his absurd first half of his life, and also thought of his heroic second half of his life. The two completely different lives before and after seemed to be full of separation. But this is him. Tony Stark is a genius. If there is only one regret, it may be that he did not accompany his daughter to grow up. Then he watched her being taken away by a man. Thinking of this, even Tony Stark, who always wanted to save face, had tears in his eyes. Thor, on the side, seemed to have let go of everything and faced it all with a calm face. He lost his mother, father, and brother one after another. Even Asgard, where he grew up, was destroyed because of the appearance of his sister. There was no news about his girlfriend who loved each other. How to say it? Thor's life was very miserable, and these tragedies forced him to grow up step by step. But now, he finally felt tired. He wanted to let it go. Facing the unstoppable explosion, all kinds of emotions appeared on the faces of the Avengers. There was reluctance, calmness, regret, and relief. Perhaps at this moment, they figured out many truths that they had not figured out, and understood many things in life that they did not understand. But all this is too late. This huge energy will undoubtedly kill them all. As for whether the earth will still exist, and how many people will be left, it is no longer in their control. They are going to die. No way, no way. The superheroes of the Avengers don't need a 16-year-old kid to save them, do they? Just when everyone was desperate, an extremely familiar voice sounded in their ears. But at this moment, the explosion miraculously stopped. Not only the explosion, but at this moment, time seemed to freeze in this second. Ronan floated in the air, looking at everyone helplessly. On his chest, the Eye of Agamotto had opened at some point. In it, a green light was blooming. Sure enough, in the end, you still have to rely on me? Ronan sighed, and on his wrists, there was also a green light flowing. He gently raised his right hand, clenched his 5 fingers, and placed his left hand on his chest, making a special gesture. Just when he was about to use the time stone, he seemed to suddenly think of something. He turned his head and looked at Strange, who was also frozen, and made a yeah gesture to him. Oh no, it should be towards him, with 2 fingers extended. Then, Ronan turned around, looking at Thanos, who was laughing wildly, and began to rotate his right hand in a counterclockwise direction. Click, click, click. All the superheroes who were frozen in time heard this sound at this moment. This sound, like the turning of a clockwork, echoed in all their minds. The scene in front of Ronan also began to rewind little by little, as if the rewind button had been pressed. The various expressions on the faces of the Avengers heroes slowly regressed to shock and disbelief, and Thanos' face of wanton laughter also slowly regressed to the initial determination. The huge energy generated by the explosion was compressed back to its original state at this moment, and the beam of light that pierced the sky also returned to the Infinity Gauntlet. The 5 originally broken Infinity Stones also regrouped and restored to their original appearance. Everything start again. But everyone only felt a tinnitus, and then the doomsday-like scene in front of them disappeared. Was it an illusion just now? Tony Stark swallowed his saliva and broke the silence. Captain Marvel, who was most sensitive to the power of the Infinity Stones, immediately looked at Ronan. At the same time, she also saw the time stone on Ronan's chest, which was glowing with green light. Ronan shrugged. Sorry, I have a bad habit. My things, I just want to keep them myself. His words also solved all the doubts of the Avengers. Of course, this also includes Thanos. They finally understood why nothing happened when Thanos put on the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped his fingers. It was not that the Infinity Stones could not fulfill Thanos' wish, nor that Thanos made any mistakes. It was just that from the beginning, one of the 6 Infinity Stones was missing. It's you. Thanos stared at Ronan intently. He had already seen the appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet on his right hand. The other gems were still glowing, but only in the groove of the time stone. Although there was still a stone, there was no light at all. From the beginning, Ronan replaced the time stone. Before I came, my teacher gave me a replica just in case. After all, the Sorcerer Supreme needs to carry the Eye of Agamotto with him, but there must be an exhibit in Kamatage. Ronan curled his lips, looking very innocent. He actually knew about this kind of thing a long time ago. Because when he was a child, he secretly took the Eye of Agamotto and wanted to study the time stone inside. However, the time stone did not react at all. Later, Ronan learned that the Eye of Agamotto had always been carried by the Ancient One. They couldn't see it, just because the Ancient One used some method to cover up the existence of the Eye of Agamotto. The one placed in Kamatage has always been a fake. Otherwise, the thing that the Sorcerer Supreme must protect with his life is left there for anyone to touch. Wouldn't it be better to let the Sorcerer Supreme commit suicide directly? Speaking of which, no one really thinks that the time stone will be so easy to get, right? No way, no way. As for why Strange can try, is there any need to say it? It was the Ancient One who did it on purpose. Impossible. You actually. For a moment, Thanos was so angry that he was speechless. He didn't realize that the time stone was fake. In fact, in the previous battle, he used the Power Stone to deal with Captain Marvel and the Reality Stone to offset the magic of Scarlet Witch. But he didn't use the power of the Time Stone. This kind of failure made him unacceptable. This time, a shrill roar replaced Thanos' wild laughter. In his right hand, the previous light shone again. But the next second, Ronan had come in front of Thanos and looked at him with a smile. The power of the Time Stone made Thanos' action of destroying the gem retreat a little bit. Thanos finally felt the despair that originally belonged to Scarlet Witch. Bang! Ronan's knee hit Thanos' abdomen directly, and then his left hand moved slightly, and the ring of Ragada directly cut off Thanos' right hand. Ah! Thanos screamed again. But Ronan didn't pause for a moment, and the energy whip was thrown out instantly, directly entangled Thanos' neck. Crack, crack. The sound of bone cracking was clearly audible. Thanos' only remaining left hand was tearing at the increasingly tight energy whip, but it was of no use. Soon, another energy whip pulled his left hand away, and nailed it firmly to the ground. Ronan looked at Thanos lying on the ground coldly, and his lips slightly opened. Thanos, I'm not here to negotiate. First of all, a good news. I advanced from the first round. Everyone is celebrating. I'm a little too excited. After all, as a newcomer, it's already very good to be able to advance to the first round. This is really thanks to everyone's help, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. Thank you all for your continuous reading, and various evaluation tickets and monthly tickets, which helped me a lot. Thank you very much. Finally, let me talk about the negative reviews. How should I put it? I don't object to negative reviews, because this is also a different voice. As you can see, many chapter reviews say that I'm a middle school student, that I wrote it wrong, that I just follow the plot, and so on. I have never deleted them, because I think this is everyone's own opinion, and I respect everyone. But there are always some people who come up and criticize without any basis. If you criticize correctly, it's fine, but what you say is just a joke, so I usually delete it. If it involves swearing, I usually ban it, because I think the book is not good. You can criticize and give opinions, but you can at least not swear, right? This is the most basic principle as a human being, and it is also related to a person's morality. So, everyone can ask questions, as long as it does not involve swearing, we can talk about it. Okay, I've wasted your time, and I hope you can continue to support me in the second round. Exclamation mark. Thank you all. Chapter 40, A New Beginning. Ronan's sudden action completely woke up the stunned people. Steve Rogers kicked Thanos' broken hand wearing the Infinity Gauntlet to the side. It seemed that such a short distance gave him a great sense of security. Thor wiped his face in panic, fearing that the two tears would be seen by his companions. After all, he was the strongest Avenger. In comparison, Tony Stark looked much calmer. He even remembered what Ronan had said to mock them. Have I ever told you? Actually, you talk really badly? Tony Stark opened his mask and looked at Ronan with a questioning look on his face. It seemed that he was asking a question, but what he actually meant was self-evident. I've heard it. It's just that those people turned into babies silently. Do you think they are right? Ronan showed a very sunny smile. Tony Stark pulled the corner of his mouth, thinking of what Ronan had done just now, and shut up very tactfully. In the verbal confrontation, he might be able to fight with Ronan for a few rounds. He could also compete with Ronan in a fight, but that method just now, thinking that he would become a baby, Tony Stark could only give Ronan a thumbs up. And Aki, Strange, who had finished the water control work, floated and landed here. Finally, when the team battle was over, he joined the battle. This team battle idiot didn't even deal 2200 damage. What do you mean by holding up those two fingers just now? Obviously, Strange saw the yeah that Ronan made to him. Ronan shrugged and looked at Tony Stark on the side. Then he raised his eyebrows at Strange. Although he didn't say anything, Strange had already understood. Only Tony Stark, as a third party in the incident, couldn't understand what they were communicating at all. When he wanted to ask a question, Captain Marvel interrupted him. Boys, let's stop discussing for a moment. We should discuss how to deal with him. Captain Marvel was talking about none other than Thanos, who was lying on the ground. Thanos still had a trace of life at this time, but because of his severe injuries, he had already passed out. In a few minutes, he would die. Except for Captain America and Thor, no one present could say anything about Captain Marvel's address of boys. After all, Captain Marvel looked like she was only in her 30s or 40s, younger than Tony Stark. But if you really compare them, among the Earthlings present, only Steve Rogers was older than her. No matter in age or anything else, I will send him to hell myself. I hope he can repent for his crimes in hell. Ronan would definitely be more active in this matter of grabbing heads. After all, this is Thanos, a naked villain. How much experience does he have? However, something Ronan never expected happened. He only noticed a flash of lightning in front of his eyes, followed by the sound of the whistling wind. Then, there was a puff. Thanos' head flew high, and blood bloomed like a fountain in front of everyone. I'm sorry, I stole your job. But I hope to end the mistakes I made back then with my own hands. At this time, Thor, whose veins were full of cheese sauce, walked out from behind the crowd. Whether it was his movements or his tone, he looked very handsome. Especially when he reached out to take back the Stormbreaker. He seemed to have a bit of the look of Thor back then. However, Ronan's eyes widened. He watched helplessly as such a huge experience package was snatched away by someone else. Fuck. Thor. I'm going to kill you. No one knew what happened that day. Just when everyone thought it was a happy ending, Ronan seemed to have gone crazy and planned to fight Thor to the death. If it weren't for a traitor who opened a portal for Thor at that time, Ronan would have even used the time gem and shouted that he would turn Thor into a sperm state. But only Ronan himself knew what he lost at that time. He took great pains to replace the time stone, let Ebony Maw stab Thanos in the back, and even caused some damage to his spirit. What was it for? Wasn't it for the big head of Thanos? Otherwise, why would he do anything troublesome? Even if his participation caused the giant cunt to die in a place where it shouldn't have died. Tony Stark fell on it and fainted. But there are other people in the Avengers. Others sacrificed their lives to protect their universe. As a result, Thor's sudden axe directly disrupted all of Ronan's plans. So while waiting for the time machine to be repaired, Thor boarded the ship of the Guardians of the Galaxy and fled directly outside the Earth. Of course, there was another reason why Ronan finally gave up chasing Thor. The system still gave him a reward. Thanos has been killed. Contribution is being calculated. Experience plus 6273. Skill points plus 2. Tyrant Butcher Knife has been obtained. Host use the time stone to reverse time. You have some understanding of the power of time. Please explore for yourself. Even so, Ronan is still angry. If he cuts off Thanos' head himself, maybe the reward will be even greater. So Ronan is getting angrier and angrier, and he wants to fly to outer space to kill Thor. Of course, this is just a thought. The end of this battle is a little abrupt, but the ending is always good. Everyone returned to their ordinary lives again. Everything was just like 5 years ago. It seemed that nothing had changed, and it seemed that everything had changed. Peter Parker returned to his former school, but unfortunately a large part of his classmates had changed. And Tony Stark also returned to his family and continued to be his daughter's slave. And Steve Rogers, now he is probably thinking about returning to that era and dancing with the woman he loves most for the rest of his life. As for Strange, he returned and became the Supreme Sorcerer again, but as a qualified Supreme Sorcerer, he still has a long way to go. At the same time, he also invited Ronan. Invite him to Kamataj. In Strange's view, he is the Supreme Sorcerer and has the obligation to ensure that the Earth will not be invaded by outsiders. Since Ronan can cross a parallel universe and come to their world, naturally, there will be new enemies who can do it. In Ronan's view, although he has been there once, he thought about it and finally agreed. Because before coming, Guyi once told him that he could talk to Strange. Although I don't know what the deep meaning of Guyi is, chatting can't be considered a bad thing. Of course, there is the most important point. There are also some doubts in his heart that need Strange's help to solve. This is related to his safety, and Ronan must go there. The following plot is considered an original plot, but it is also created based on the comics of the Marvel Universe and his own conjectures, and it will also connect the previous foreshadowing. I watched the ending of She-Hulk last night. I didn't expect that she could break the fourth wall. It's so similar to Deadpool. So I came up with a new idea. It can even seamlessly connect my outline, which I didn't expect. But this plot will be in the later part, so please look forward to it. Chapter 41. Teach Strange a Lesson. A few days later, Kamataj. In the temple in New York, Strange and Ronan sat face to face. He accepted Strange's invitation and talked to him before leaving. So, you asked me to come here, is there something? Ronan was actually quite interested in communicating with Strange. Although the two were not in the same universe, they were in camouflage after all, and there was not much to communicate. But even exchanging experiences would be rewarding for both of them. Of course, in terms of making mistakes, Ronan always regarded Strange as a benchmark. You changed the future, right? To be precise, your appearance changed the future of our timeline. Strange was holding a cup of hot cocoa. The side effect of white magic on him was the legendary gastric ulcer. That's right, the use of white magic also has side effects. It's just that compared to those black magic, the side effects of white magic are much smaller. Ronan even suspected that the side effect of Ancient One's use of white magic was hair loss. As for Strange, he no longer had the ability to observe the timeline after losing the time stone. Although, according to legend, the Eye of Agamotto also has this ability. But from the current Strange's point of view, he has no experience in this area. As the Supreme Sorcerer, you should also know, the timeline is not immutable. The reason why your future has changed is also due to your time machine. Ronan sighed, as if admitting that he was related to this matter, but also putting aside his relationship with himself. After all, the source of everything comes from the time machine of this universe. But in all the futures I have observed, you did not appear. The only condition for our success is that Natasha dies and brings back the soul stone for us. Tony sacrificed himself and snapped his fingers to find a way out for us. But now, everything has changed completely. Strange looked at Ronan. In the tens of millions of futures he observed, Ronan did not appear once. There was even no second way to choose. But now, not only Ronan is here, but Tony Stark and Black Widow, who were supposed to be sacrificed, are also alive and well. All of this doesn't seem to be real. However, Ronan smiled. I'll make a bold guess. Is there a possibility that something that you can't see happened? Ronan began his own deception. In fact, Strange's guess was not wrong at all. The source of everything was the appearance of Ronan. Whether it was Black Widow or Tony Stark, they were supposed to be dead in the script. But now, both of them are alive. The future will definitely change because of this. What do you mean? Strange frowned. You know, the future he saw was all done through the time stone. If there are things that the time stone can't see, what level will it rise to? More importantly, Ronan's appearance broke the prediction of the time stone. Could it be that Ronan's rank is higher than the time stone? Let me give you a simple example. A real example that appeared because of the appearance of Tony and others. Ronan changed his posture and began to tell the case to Strange, who was thirsty for knowledge. That's right, what he was going to talk about was Loki. Okay, go ahead. Strange sat up straight. He knew that what Ronan was going to say next was definitely something he had never heard of. Moreover, it was probably very important. Let me ask you first, after the Chitauri invaded the Earth, what happened to Loki in your universe? Ronan did not start the lecture, but instead asked a question. Although I was not the Sorcerer Supreme at the time, I have read the relevant records. Loki at the time was taken back to Asgard by Thor. According to Thor's description, Loki had been imprisoned in Asgard's prison until he was released by Thor later. Strange knew about this. After all, for the Sorcerer Supreme who possessed the Time Stone, the past and future on Earth were just a picture. But if I tell you that Loki in our universe is completely different, what would you think? Ronan smiled. What do you mean? This was the second time Strange said this today. But this time, he seemed to be able to feel something vaguely. Loki in our universe took the Space Stone after Tony showed up. Not only was he not escorted back to Asgard, he even escaped through the Space Stone. Of course, he was finally captured by the Time Administration and successfully corrected history. Ronan told the story of Loki's bizarre adventure. However, Strange became more and more confused the more he listened. Wait. If Loki escaped because of Tony's appearance, it can only mean that the timeline of your universe is developing. But what did you say about correcting history, and what is that Time Administration? Strange could understand every word of what Ronan said, but he didn't understand them together. Although he knew what it meant to correct history, he had never heard of the Time Administration. This made it difficult for him to understand. Okay, let's do it bit by bit. First of all, the Time Administration has another name, the Time and Space Anomaly Administration. Their duty is to repair the disordered timeline and maintain the order of time. Ronan first explained the general role of the time administration. Of course, he didn't intend to say more. After all, it had nothing to do with Strange. Wait, you mean that Loki's escape is a disordered timeline? And Loki being taken back to Asgard is the normal timeline? This seems to be completely consistent with our timeline. Strange frowned, and he began to slowly understand what Ronan meant. Although it was difficult, he had changed from believing in science to believing in metaphysics, and this change was not that difficult for him. Normally, yes. Ronan nodded. But what does this have to do with what we are discussing? If your appearance is similar to Loki at that time, then why weren't you taken away to restore our normal timeline? Strange asked the most critical question. In fact, this was also a question that troubled Ronan for a long time. After thinking about it, Ronan only thought of one explanation. Strange, in fact, you were wrong from the beginning. With your ability, you can observe what happens on the timeline. But, can you also perceive the parallel universe? Everyone, please be patient. The matter about the time gem is related to a subsequent plot. I have already laid the groundwork before, but no one seems to have noticed it. And why it didn't work, I will explain it later. Blame me this time. Next time I will make the foreshadowing more obvious. Finally, thank you all for your recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 42. Thousands of different parallel universe. When Ronan brought up this concept, Strange frowned. Normally, what he saw actually represented the endings that would result from the various choices made by Steve Rogers and his friends. For example, it was not Hawkeye and Black Widow who went to Vormir, but Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. So would they get the Soul Stone? Obviously, they did not meet the requirements. If they did not get the stone at that time, their particles would be doomed to be insufficient. There would be no future they wanted to save. This was one of the endings. According to the original timeline, Tony Stark and his friends chose the most suitable one among tens of millions of choices. Therefore, they were able to bring the others back with the power of the Infinity Stones, and then there was the final battle. But the appearance of Ronan changed this timeline from the beginning. Parallel universe, I don't understand. Strange took a sip of hot cocoa and waited for Ronan's explanation. However, Ronan smiled and waved his hand, and a picture appeared in front of the two of them. A clear timeline. This node is where Tony and his team went to find the Infinity Stones. It seems that they are going back to the past, getting the 6 Infinity Stones, and then putting them back. There is nothing wrong with this theory itself. However, they ignored the concept of parallel universes in this theory. As he spoke, Ronan pinched out another line on this timeline. Although it is connected to the main timeline, it looks different. I would like to call this node where they arrived the origin of the parallel universe. It is because of their appearance that the normal timeline has a different time. Just like Tony Stark accidentally lost the Space Stone, which was taken by Loki and allowed to escape. This is completely different from what they experienced before. So, a parallel universe with roughly the same history, but a completely different future appeared. Ronan stretched out his hands, erased the main timeline, and then infinitely magnified the branch. Although it looked like just a line, in the eyes of Ronan and Strange, it seemed like a video appeared. Strange saw the scene of Loki escaping and being captured by the Time Administration. Of course, Ronan did not appear in these images, nor did Kang the Conqueror. You mean, you came to us because of the appearance of this parallel universe? No, that's not right either. If, as you said, the history is the same, but the future is different, you shouldn't be in Kamatage. Strange looked at Ronan. He was sure that the problem was with Ronan, because he had never seen Ronan. No, you're wrong. Ronan shook his head, and the images in his hands changed again. I only said that the history is roughly the same, but not exactly the same. You should know the concept of parallel universes. Ronan looked at Strange. Strange nodded. He still knew these basic theories. My universe may be exactly the same as yours, whether in terms of culture, history, or technology. But can you ensure that everyone in each parallel universe is the same? In other words, Tony Stark in your universe has a lovely daughter. But can you be sure that in my universe, the future Tony Stark will not have a son or twins? Ronan looked at Strange in front of him and said the most important point. This is actually the concept of a parallel universe. A universe that is similar, but not exactly the same. Hearing this, Strange seemed to understand something. In other words, the so-called past that Tony and the others went to at that time was not the past they experienced, but an unknown parallel universe. There, you are the future Sorcerer Supreme, and I. Strange hesitated and looked at Ronan. Ronan smiled and nodded, saying, you are still the world-renowned surgeon, and as far as I know, you will not encounter that bizarre car accident in my universe. That is to say, you in my universe are just an ordinary person, and will not be exposed to so-called magic. But you will marry, and have children with the person you love most. This sentence pierced Strange's heart at once. If there was one thing he regretted the most, it was that during the 5 years he disappeared, his beloved Christine had been engaged to another man. He could no longer undo the mistakes he made in the past. What is lost, will always be lost. Of course, maybe in other parallel universes, you are still the supreme sorcerer, but Christine is still your lover. Or, in other parallel universes, you have fallen and become corrupted with the dark dimension. It's all uncertain. Ronan shrugged, as if he said this inadvertently. But the speaker is unintentional, but the listener is intentional. From this sentence, Strange seemed to hear something. What about you? Will there be other you in parallel universes? Strange looked at Ronan. However, Ronan shrugged and said, maybe, I don't know. I was just giving an example just now. Maybe in other parallel universes, the Sorcerer Supreme is not you, nor me, nor even Teacher Ancient One. Of course, this sentence was made up by Ronan. According to Ancient One's statement and Ronan's own speculation, the Sorcerer Supreme in other parallel universes will most likely be Strange. And Ronan is just the only one who made a mistake among billions of parallel universes. Maybe it's because of time travel, or maybe it's because of other reasons. It's just that Ronan is not sure yet. So, combined with what I told you at the beginning, my appearance has changed your so-called history. There are two possibilities. One is that we are now in a completely different parallel universe. At this point, Ronan glanced at Strange. In fact, his heart was also beating. He couldn't be sure whether he had accidentally created a parallel universe or completely changed the future of the main universe. Another thing is that my appearance is one of the tacitly permitted variables. It's just that this variable cannot be detected through the time stone, but is produced by a combination of circumstances. Hearing this, Strange, who was originally a little nervous, also relaxed. In a way, as the Supreme Sorcerer, he knows more than others. But it is also this knowledge that far exceeds others that allows Strange to understand more unpredictable dangers. Parallel universes or tacitly permitted variables. At least, Ronan's appearance will not cause much danger to their future. That's enough. I almost understand what you said. As for the parallel universe, I hope you don't tell others. Strange hesitated for a moment and believed Ronan's words temporarily. In any case, Ronan's appearance can be regarded as helping them save the world. Even if there are some things he doesn't know in the middle. Of course, I will keep it secret. Ronan nodded. After all, he was leaving, so there was no need to explain where he came from. Seeing that Strange had believed what he said, Ronan also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it's not easy to fool people. However, Ronan will also answer his own questions next. I was really out of my mind to get up at 4 o'clock to watch the game. I only slept for 4 hours, and I was still very angry after watching it. I might as well write some words with this time. It's really annoying. I'm going to have breakfast. Chapter 43, a machine that predicts the future? You finished asking my questions. Now it's my turn to ask you. Ronan took a deep breath. This was also the reason why he agreed to communicate with Strange. Because this question had been bothering him for a long time. What is it? Strange was quite happy. After all, Ronan answered his questions, so he wouldn't be stingy. Ronan narrowed his eyes and made a gesture in front of his chest. The two of them were instantly swallowed up by the mirror space. Seeing Ronan's actions, Strange was also a little surprised. He didn't think Ronan was going to attack him. What surprised him was that Ronan looked so careful. What is it that makes you have to use the mirror space to communicate with me? Isn't even Kamatage safe? The more he talked, the uglier Strange's face looked. If even Kamatage on Earth cannot deal with certain dangers, then there is no safe place on the entire Earth. No, it's not that it's unsafe. I can only say that I'm afraid that what we say will be heard by others. Ronan's face was more serious than ever. Seeing Ronan's expression, Strange also became serious. Okay, what do you mean? Strange finally got to the point. I want to know, since you became the Supreme Sorcerer, have you felt that something is interfering with the course of history? In other words, there is someone who can predict the future like you, and he is quietly eliminating some people. Ronan opened his mouth and said something shocking. Subconsciously, Strange shouted the 3 words impossible. However, Ronan did not ask him, but just looked at him silently, waiting for his final answer. This answer was undoubtedly thoughtless, and Ronan did not care. He needed Strange to think before speaking. Sure enough, when he felt Ronan's gaze, Strange gradually calmed down. He could say the 3 words impossible simply because he was unwilling to believe it. But in fact, this kind of thing has happened before. Can I ask you first, why did you come to this conclusion? As far as I know, there is no other way on Earth to observe the future, except the Time Stone. Even the Eye of Agamotto has temporarily sealed this ability for some reason. Strange looked at Ronan, wondering why he said that. Another person who can observe the future. Could it be that the other party has some power that they don't know about? Ronan pondered for a moment, and finally he took a deep breath, and the Time Stone on his chest began to emit a faint green light. A picture appeared in front of them. The people in the center of the picture were Steve Rogers and Black Widow. Soon, Falcon carried a person and flew over from the sky, looking like he was dealing with someone. Strange looked at Ronan with curiosity. Ronan didn't say anything, but just motioned him to continue looking down. Zora is a program that selects targets for the Insight project. The bald man who was brought up knelt on the ground, panting and saying he was one of Hydra's agents. Sitwell. What target? The person asking the question was Steve Rogers. You. Sitwell pointed at Steve Rogers first, and then continued to list. A host in Cairo, the Deputy Minister of Defense of Goa, and the high school valedictorian in Iowa. Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange. Anyone who threatens Hydra, whether now or in the future. When he said this, Ronan looked up at Strange who was standing beside him. At this time, Strange's face also changed. He didn't know who this person was, but the other party said his name. You know, for wizards like them, their names are rarely known to outsiders. Future? How does it calculate the future? Steve Rogers continued to ask. Sitwell raised his head, looked at Steve Rogers who was close at hand, and actually laughed. Why not? The 21st century is an ebook, and Zora taught Hydra to read it. At this point, Sitwell saw that the others did not understand what he meant, and added again, your bank records, medical records, voting tendencies, emails, and phone calls. Zora uses algorithms to analyze people's past and predict their future. At this point, the picture stopped. This part of the plot appeared a few years ago, when Steve Rogers destroyed SHIELD. Of course, SHIELD at that time could be called Hydra. Have you found anything important? Ronan looked at Strange again. Strange held his chin, his eyes full of solemnity. The person you said can predict the future. Is it the Zora in this conversation? No matter how powerful it is just a supercomputer. Maybe it can guess people's preferences, but how can it predict the future? Until now, Strange still didn't believe it. Although he is also a modern person, he once lived in a modern city and experienced the convenience brought to him by technology. However, although technology can predict people's preferences, how can it know what you will do tomorrow? This is something Strange couldn't believe. However, Ronan shook his head. Let me give you another hint. This happened in 2014. Ronan said a time point. When he said the year 2014, Strange stood up from his chair. The calmness on his face before had long disappeared. 2014. At that time, Strange seemed to have thought of something. Yes, at that time, you were still a world-renowned surgeon. You didn't become Doctor Strange. More importantly, when Sitwell said you were a threat, he didn't put you on the same level as the ordinary people mentioned above. Instead, you were put on the same level as Tony Stark. Subconsciously, this means that your level is the same as Tony Stark, or even higher. Ronan's words seemed to wake up Strange all of a sudden. Yes, at that time, Strange was just an ordinary surgeon. No matter how famous he was, he didn't participate in politics, and he didn't have any secrets. How could he be considered a threat by Hydra, even on par with the then famous Iron Man Tony Stark? Could it be that Zola at the time already knew that Strange would become Doctor Strange? If that was the case, thinking of this, Strange broke out in a cold sweat. He had brushed shoulders with death without knowing it. Chapter 44 Abnormal Timeline. Looking at Strange's expression, Ronan did not speak, because he thought of another thing. Before he came to this universe, Ancient One said something to him at the end. Don't rush back, communicate with Strange. Although Ronan did not agree at the time, he would not think so now. Before Thanos came, he saw with his own eyes that the Avengers used modern technology to create the Infinity Gauntlet. This can almost be called explaining metaphysics with science. On that day, Ronan also thought of the picture that was just played. It is also a representative of replacing metaphysics with science. If the Infinity Gauntlet can really be established, then Ronan's previous speculation about Sitwell's words will be overturned. From the beginning, Ronan actually thought the same as Strange. He also thought that Strange at the time might have some problems with his political inclinations, and his identity was that he was a well-known surgeon, so it caused obstacles to Hydra. But later, after seeing the Infinity Gauntlet appear, Ronan had to re-examine his previous thoughts. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. Since the Infinity Gauntlet can succeed, can Zora really predict the future? Does this machine still exist? We can't let it fall into the hands of those people. Strange's eyes showed a fighting spirit. In any case, this machine is too tricky. Imagine a supercomputer that can predict the future, running many times faster than the human brain. What impact will that have on the future? Even if the duty of the Supreme Sorcerer is only to resist enemies outside the Earth. However, he is also a member of the Avengers. At least tell others this news. According to the situation at the time, this Zora has been destroyed by Steve. But Zora is actually just a program, and it is not certain that those people have no backup. Ronan stared into the distance, but in fact, he had been thinking about something else in his heart. Whether Zora in this world exists or not is actually not related to him. After all, this world has its own superhero team. What Ronan is worried about is his own world. You know, in his timeline, Zora is still serving Hydra. It won't be long before the Shield will launch their plan. By then, will Zora, who can predict the future, regard Ronan as a target of threat? If that's the case, then Ronan might have to act in advance. In any case, we still have to inform Steve and the others about this. As the Sorcerer Supreme, I can't interfere in the affairs of Earth. But thank you for reminding us. Strange looked at Ronan, with a grateful look in his eyes. Ronan shook his head. From the beginning, his purpose was not to remind Strange. He was just doing it for himself. Let's get back to the original question. During the time you were the Sorcerer Supreme, did you find that the timeline was abnormal? In other words, some fragments of the future have changed? Ronan brought the topic back to the original question. This time, Strange fell into deep thought. As he expected, Strange's face soon became ugly. What you said did make me think of something. There were a few times when I observed the future, I found that the timeline had fluctuated slightly. Although it is normal for the timeline to fluctuate occasionally. After all, everyone makes different choices, and the future will also have some different changes. But there were 2 or 3 times the fluctuations were a bit abnormal. Strange seemed to recall something. Oh, which times? Ronan instantly became interested. These things may not have happened in Ronan's universe yet, or they may be happening. Therefore, Ronan needs to confirm it in person when the time comes. One time was the year when I just became the Supreme Sorcerer, which was 2016. It must be said that the biggest news at that time was that Steve and Tony broke up and the two sides fought. At that time, the timeline changed a lot. Strange began to recall these events. Ronan nodded. This time, the incident should be the plot of the Civil War. Ronan needed to go back and recall it. Another time was when Eric announced the opening of Wakanda. At that time, the time flow had a big fluctuation. But that fluctuation was within the allowable range. Any excess would be dangerous to the earth. Strange talked about the second thing. When Ronan heard this, he was suddenly stunned. Wait, who are you talking about? Eric? The more Ronan listened, the more familiar the name sounded. It seemed like he had heard it somewhere before. That's right, Eric, the king of Wakanda. You should have seen him too. He participated in the last battle. The man wearing the Black Panther suit is him. Strange explained to him. No. Ronan immediately felt something was wrong. In his memory, the king of Wakanda should be T'Challa. He is the Black Panther. What about T'Challa? Ronan couldn't help asking. T'Challa. He died in the fight for the throne of Wakanda, so Eric became the king. According to Wakanda's customs, if a member of the royal family wants to inherit the throne, they must defeat the other party, regardless of life or death. Strange looked at Ronan with some doubts. I don't know why he asked this. However, Ronan's face changed drastically. The Black Panther he saw was Eric, not T'Challa. No, this is not right at all. Although Eric is nominally a member of the royal family, his father was the insider who was responsible for stealing vibranium back then. To put it simply, his father is a traitor to Wakanda. How could such a son of a traitor have the power to inherit the throne? And he also killed T'Challa, who had trained for many years. Unless the stain on his father was erased by someone in some way. The only person who could do this, apart from some high-ranking officials in the United States, was Zora. Ronan figured it all out immediately. That's right, this matter is most likely a conspiracy of Hydra. They used Zora to whitewash and even rewrite the stain and resume of Eric's father, giving Eric the opportunity to compete for the throne. Then, they used some method to defeat T'Challa. Eric eventually became the king of Wakanda. Damn, wonderful. Ronan raised his eyebrows. He seemed to have figured everything out. Since they have been driven underground, they might as well maximize this advantage. This is very similar to the usual style of Hydra. It's so authentic. During the recent meeting, whether it is comments or chapter reviews, they are all blocked. It's normal that everyone can't see it. Finally, I beg for recommendation votes and monthly tickets. I'm thinking of a second round. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 45, New York Temple, smashed for the second time. In fact, whether Hydra has a tunnel or has really entered the tunnel, Ronan doesn't care much. After all, it's the matter of this world. In his world, these things have not happened yet. Therefore, Ronan has the opportunity to solve this matter. Destroying those Hydra soldiers may not get much experience. But if you destroy a computer that can predict, or more accurately, an artificial intelligence that can predict, how much experience will you get? Thinking of this, Ronan's eyes lit up. Although he lost Thanos experience this time, he discovered a new big gift package invisibly. If he nurtures this big gift package and lets it continue to develop, can he get more experience? At this moment, Ronan seemed to have discovered a new world. I see, your world's timeline is still very early, right? You want to know this matter in order to deal with this situation that will occur in the future. Strange seemed to understand Ronan's intention. After all, Ronan's timeline is much later than Th's. It's also good to take precautions in advance. Ah, yes, you're right, that's what I mean. Ronan nodded. He was originally thinking about how to find a reasonable reason to make Strange believe. In the end, Strange attacked himself. It can only be said that the thinking of the wizard is different from that of others. Then you can only rely on yourself. After all, there are many superheroes in your timeline, right? Strange shrugged and regained his original calm. The reason why he lost his composure before was just because he was suddenly attacked by Ronan. Just imagine, a supercomputer that can predict the future. What kind of crisis will the Earth encounter? Even if the crisis on Earth has nothing to do with his responsibility as the supreme sorcerer. But, he is at least an Earthling. Of course, someone will naturally solve this matter. I just don't want to be regarded as a danger when I go to school one day and directly raise my school to the ground with a missile. Ronan pouted. He still wanted to be a student quietly for a few years. Strange, who was drinking hot cocoa, suddenly choked. He didn't know whether he was scalded or drank too fast. Are you studying in school? How old are you? Strange avoided the spilled hot cocoa and swallowed his saliva. Ronan glanced at him with some disdain. You look so unworldly. 16 years old, first year of high school. What's the matter? Haven't you seen a 16-year-old candidate for the Supreme Sorcerer? Do you know what it means to be a student with the status of a professional wizard? However, when the professional wizard was mentioned, Ronan always felt that Strange's face was a little strange. He didn't know if it was because he had seen too much AI in his previous life, but he always felt that this face was not as suitable as the bangs. By the way, do you know someone named Holmes? Sherlock Holmes. After all, this face is the most classic with this name. Strange tilted his head with a puzzled expression on his face. He must know Sherlock Holmes, but isn't that a character in the novel? Why, is there something wrong with him? Or is there something wrong with his author? Strange thought of this immediately. However, Ronan smiled and shook his head and said, "It's okay, it has nothing to do with me. I just think your face is a perfect match for Sherlock Holmes in the novel. Especially your personality." Ronan smacked his lips. If his system was a system for making movies, he would have given Strange the entire role of Sherlock Holmes. It doesn't matter if you can't act, just play your true colors. Strange's face darkened, and his right hand directly knocked on the glass-like mirrored wall next to him. He had also read this book. He naturally knew the character of the protagonist of this book. He stood up and didn't want to talk to Ronan about these things anymore. Bang. However, just when he stood up and was about to go to the side to pour another cup of hot cocoa, he bumped his head against the wall. The crisp sound of his forehead hitting the wall surrounded the mirrored space. Ronan looked at Strange in disbelief, as if to say, "Are you sick? If you have something to do, don't go up. If there is a wall, do you really hit it? What is this?" Strange covered his forehead and looked at Ronan. His voice was also muffled by the collision. The grievance and disbelief on his face were mixed together, and Ronan almost laughed out loud. "This is the wall of the mirror space. Teacher Guyui didn't tell you, right?" Ronan held back his laughter and looked at Strange seriously. His action and voice were really funny. "I know this is the wall of the mirror space, but didn't I just cancel your mirror space? Why did it appear again?" Of course Strange knew what it was, but he didn't understand why he had cancelled it, but this mirror space was still there. This is why he installed it without thinking. "Then I don't know. My mirror space is what it is now after the exchange with Wang Jiao, and it has been less than half a month. If you don't believe me, you can ask him." Ronan waved his hand and cancelled the culprit. Hearing this, Strange was even more puzzled. Obviously, everyone learned the same mirror space. Could it be that the methods of removing it are different? Could it be that Wang told me some secrets when he communicated with me? If there is a secret, he will definitely teach you. Ronan shrugged his shoulders, looking innocent. He couldn't tell Strange that his mirror space was added. Although the method of opening and closing is the same, the only difference is that a little bit of illusion is added. Just now, Strange thought that the scene of removing the mirror space is the ability of illusion. Strange looked like he had seen a ghost. He still knew about this matter. After all, Wang had told him some things before. This included the matter of communicating with Ronan about the mirror space. However, he didn't say that the result after the communication would be like this. "Forget it, I'll ask him later. When exactly will you leave?" Strange waved his hand. He was more concerned about the time when Ronan left. After all, it would not be good for this world if a person from another world stayed too long. Soon, just waiting for Tony and the others to put the time machine. Boom. Before Ronan could finish, a violent explosion interrupted him. A big hole was smashed in the ceiling of the New York sanctuary, which was originally very solid. "This is the second time. I'm begging for monthly tickets from everyone. It's already halfway through the month, and the monthly tickets will be cleared soon. So why not give them to me, so that I can remember everyone's names in my little notebook?" Also, I had so much fun writing the following chapters that I couldn't even stop. It's a pity that I can't share them with you now. It seems that everyone can only wait a little longer. Hehe. Chapter 46 Celebrating Fireworks. Who is doing take guy? Looking at Strange's back as he rushed out without saying a word, Ronan silently gave him a thumbs up in his heart. It's the same old saying. If there is a wall, it's really rammed, and if there is a problem, it's really going to happen. But Ronan's speed was not slow, and he ran out following Strange's footsteps. After all, he is a professional at watching the excitement. At this time, several wizards have gathered in the hall of the New York Temple. They all hold the ring of Ragada in their hands, as if something terrible has happened. In the center of the hall, there is a cannonball lying, and you can even feel the heat coming from the cannonball if you get close. Is this a celebratory firework? Ronan looked at the cannonball with a strange expression, and then looked at the ceiling. At this time, a ray of light has been revealed from the ceiling. He didn't recognize the model of this cannonball, but he could understand the logo of Stark Group printed on the cannonball. There is no doubt that this is a weapon produced by Tony Stark and his team. What's going on? Strange frowned. An unexploded shell just fell in the middle of the hall. Who wouldn't be confused? I don't know. It was like this when we came. One of the wizards shook his head. He didn't know what happened. Although they were all wizards, they were also mortals. Just a bright shell fell in, but it didn't explode. Just thinking about it makes me feel lucky. Once it exploded, how many of them would survive? Don't move. Just when a wizard wanted to touch the missile, Ronan stopped him. He glanced at Strange, and Strange also looked at him, and then the two nodded to each other. Go call Tony. There is a problem for him that needs him to deal with. Half an hour later, Tony Stark stood in front of the shell and looked at it carefully. His glasses had already scanned the shell. From the outside, this is indeed ammunition made by Tony Stark Group before. But the inside has been modified. For something like this, with the technology of our Stark Group, we can't make a dud. After saying that, Tony Stark curled his lips and looked down on the shell in front of him. Obviously, this is not their level. If this shell didn't explode, then it should be on the roof, not here. Strange pointed at the ceiling, his face a little ugly. Why didn't Ancient One make any mistakes when he was the Supreme Sorcerer? Even when Wong was the Supreme Sorcerer, it was all safe and smooth. But why was it that when he was the Supreme Sorcerer, the roof was smashed through twice in a row? This is a naked provocation. I know, I found it when I scanned it just now. There is a special material on the surface of this shell, so the shell is very hard. But it is precisely because of the modification that it did not explode. In other words, you are really lucky. Tony Stark glanced at the people around him and didn't know who had this luck. The chance of this happening is actually very small. After all, there is only one thing that can be used to blow people up, and it has been modified. However, it has not been detonated. Just thinking about it makes me feel lucky. What should we do? A wizard next to him asked. What should we do? There are two ways. One is to find a place where no one is, and I will find a way to detonate it. And the other way is that we analyze this shell and see if there are any traces of the modification methods. After all, you don't really think that this shell was accidentally dropped into your place by someone else, right? Tony Stark looked at Strange on the side. Strange couldn't help but frown. It's not that there is anything wrong with Tony Stark's two methods. It's just that the tone of his voice made him feel very uncomfortable, as if he had heard it somewhere before. The more he thought about it, the more familiar it became. Ronan sat on a chair next to him, eating cake leisurely. This cake was brought by Tony Stark, who said it was a thank you gift from Pepper Potts. No, it should be Pepper Stark to Ronan. They should be thanking Ronan for saving all their lives. TSK, TSK, TSK. Tony, you are becoming more and more sarcastic now. Aren't you afraid of being beaten by others for your attitude? Steven, I don't know what kind of temper you have. If someone talks to me like this, I will let him see what Kamatage's killing stick is. Ronan swallowed the cake in his mouth and quietly threw a fire into the firewood. However, before the small flame ignited, it was put out by Strange. Because Strange remembered who Tony Stark's tone of voice sounded like. It was like the person who ate the cake. Do you need help? Strange selectively ignored Ronan's words. Yeah, you need to help me move this shell out. It's better to have two people with steady hands. After all, no one can tell when it will explode. Tony Stark shrugged. In fact, he could do this job. But there are so many wizards here, and it's still very simple to move this thing out. Strange nodded, glanced at the wizards around him, and couldn't help shaking his head. These wizards were all newly promoted wizards, and their abilities were not outstanding. The king was still on duty at the London Temple, so there was only one person who could help. He looked up at Ronan on the side. As if sensing Strange's gaze, Ronan's hand stopped eating the cake. Why are you looking at me? My hands are shaking. Unless you give me some special feedback, my hands will keep shaking. Ronan immediately understood what Strange meant. How could he ask him to help without paying a little reward? He was not working for free, and Ronan was the one who would not do anything without profit. Then how can your hands stop shaking? Strange pulled the corner of his mouth. He felt like he was about to fall into a pit. But there was no way. Now there was no one more suitable except Ronan. I need you to do me a small favor. A small favor, not difficult. Ronan closed one eye and pinched his index finger and thumb in front of him with his right hand. Lost the Korean market. Although Ronan said so, Strange always felt that Ronan's small favor was not simple. But now that it was said here, Strange could only agree reluctantly. Just a small favor? Strange confirmed again. Ronan nodded with a smile and showed his right hand in particular. Strange sighed and nodded heavily. He looked reluctant. But anyway, he got on Ronan's pirate ship. If you want to get off, then wait. I was thinking, should I reward myself with a cute master so that everyone will believe that I will not be a eunuch and then feel at ease to follow? There is one more thing. I want to change the update time because the get off work time of the unit has changed, so I can go home early. In this case, it is better to update earlier. What do you think? Chapter 47. I pierced the veil in Zanus. According to Strange's plan, he would use the mirror space to lock the surroundings to prevent explosions and uncontrollable situations. Ronan was responsible for pulling the shells out of the floor and putting them in a box nearby. This box was specially processed by the Stark Group to store some extremely dangerous items. Then, Tony Stark would be responsible for dissecting the bomb to find out the clues inside. Since he had received the benefits, Ronan's hands did not shake. Strange waved his hand and opened the mirror space, covering Ronan and himself, and all the others were excluded from the mirror space. Are you ready? Your hands won't shake anymore, will they? Strange waved his hands again, and the ring of Ragada blocked in front of him. Ronan pouted, ignored Strange's words, and aimed his hands at the bomb. The energy whip was swung out instantly. When the red energy whip was swung out, Strange's pupils shrank slightly. He could see that Ronan's energy whip seemed to be a little different from his energy whip. But before he could think of the difference immediately appeared. The energy whip actually took the initiative to break away from Ronan's hands and quickly flew towards the shell. The next second, the energy whip was wrapped around the shell, slowly wrapping it up a little bit. It was as if there was an invisible big hand controlling all the movements. Strange was dumbfounded. The energy whip can be used like this? Why can't his? He looked at Ronan beside him, but Ronan was now concentrating on dealing with the bomb in front of him. He didn't want to be so young. Boom. As soon as the energy whip touched the shell, a devastating explosion instantly engulfed Ronan and Strange. A sea of fire spread across the sky, and crazy waves of fire bombarded the walls of the mirror space one after another. The fiercely burning flames devoured everything in the mirror space unscrupulously. At this moment, the entire mirror space was filled with flames. Fuck. A national curse attracted the attention of Tony Stark and others. A golden mystical door appeared behind them, and Ronan and Strange escaped from it in a very embarrassed manner. Behind them, there was even a raging wave of fire. Ronan had many more burn marks on his body. If Ronan had not protected his face very alertly at the last second, I'm afraid that his very immersive face would have left a few scars. And Strange was not much better. Although he had more clothes on, he had become the legendary beggar's clothes. Even his curly hair was affected by the flames, and he almost had another perm. What happened? Did the shell explode? Seeing the two people in such an embarrassed state, Tony Stark's first reaction was that the shell exploded. Are you sure your hands are not shaking? Strange did not answer Tony Stark's words, but turned to look at Ronan. Although they were mentally prepared for the shell to explode before this, the intensity of this explosion was beyond their imagination. If it weren't in the mirror space, the intensity of the explosion just now would have affected at least 5 streets nearby, and the surrounding area would have definitely turned into a sea of fire. This is not a matter of handshaking, we were tricked. Ronan spitted, and a fierceness that had never been seen before appeared on his face. Although his personality has always been that of a carefree person, this time is completely different from before. Because someone wants his life. What's going on? Tony Stark, who couldn't get a word in, asked hurriedly. Ronan took a deep breath and looked at the palm of his right hand, which still had a trace of burns on it. The moment my energy whip touched the shell exploded immediately. In other words, the line that detonated this shell is my spell. The more Ronan spoke, the uglier his face became. In the eyes of outsiders, Kamitage's spells and magic are actually borrowed from the founder of Ashanti. However, in fact, there is still a difference. Because everyone has different spellcasting habits, different understandings of spells, and even different proficiency. So the spells cast can never be exactly the same. Just as there are no 2 identical leaves in the world, so is the magician. So, this bomb is aimed at you? Strange seemed to understand something. Yes, before I cast the energy whip, you also cast the mirror space. According to common sense, your spells and magic have also come into contact with this bomb. But it is safe and sound. What does this mean? Ronan took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He knew that anger could not solve anything unless he was a Saiyan. But he was not. So, he had to keep a cool head to figure this out. This means that the other party knows your spellcasting habits and your spells. Also, he knows your unique energy whip. Strange's face also sank. Although his relationship with Ronan can only be regarded as knowing each other. But, this is in the New York Temple. Isn't this a slap in the face of Strange? Ronan took a deep breath and his brain began to spin rapidly. Who is it? Want to kill him? Counting carefully, Ronan has been so low key in the past 16 years that he can't be any lower key. Even in school, he is just an ordinary student with an average academic ranking. Not to mention attracting the attention of such people. Even those little girls are just envious of Ronan's face. It can be said that Ronan's image in the outside world in the past 10 years can almost be said to have no other advantages except that shocking face. Not to mention offending people. Of course, if those school bullies who were beaten by Ronan could also travel to this universe and throw such a bomb to Ronan, then Ronan would have nothing to say. But what Ronan cares about most is actually another thing. The hooded man knew Ronan's identity, so he traveled through the timeline just to find Ronan. Is it possible that others have also thought of this method? But is this person Ronan's future enemy? The enemy in the future wants to kill Ronan now, so as to erase him in the future. This is not impossible. Thinking of this, Ronan's face became even weirder. What did I do in the future? Could it be that I pierced the anus of those villains? Sacrifice a book. The new book of the fine author must absorb his luck. Friends who are interested in historical texts can go and have a look. Book title: LV Boo, My Immortal Cultivation Simulator Appropriate System, plus Decisive Killing, plus Nonsense. LV Fengson, the ultimate fan of the Three Kingdoms, woke up and found himself in the Three Kingdoms era, becoming LV Boo. The time was the 3rd year of Jinan, and the KO army that surrounded Xiaopi was as many as 100,000. His original purpose was just to live with a smile. But he never expected that with the blessing of the simulation cultivation system, the road would become wider and wider. On the White Gate Tower, he is the god of war who does not succumb to fate. My destiny is in my own hands. Whether I live or die, my word is final. In Zhaojia village, Changshan, he is a close brother who sleeps side by side with Zhao Yun. I have Ziling, which is like adding wings to a tiger on Wulong Hill. He is a humble gentleman who respects the wise and humbles himself, never likes to fight, and visits Zhuge Liang 3 times at his cottage. Liangzi, you see I have come here 3 times. Can you come out and help me? Zhuge Liang, I'm a wild man from Nanyang, who has been enjoying farming for a long time, and is lazy to deal with the world. Please forgive me for not being able to obey your orders. Lubu, Liangzi, you are the smartest in the world, and I'm the strongest in the world. If you and I join forces, we can flatten the world with one wave of soldiers. Zhuge Liang, the general and I have different ideas. Please go back. Lubu cried. If you don't come out, what will happen to the people? Zhuge Liang just turned his back and did not respond. Lubu walked out of the thatched cottage in disappointment. When he was near the door, he said, Liangzi, I have a daughter, 18 years old, talented in both civil and military affairs, and beautiful as a flower. Zhuge Liang quickly chased after him, bowed and said, to help you, General. Chapter 48. If there is danger, then add some more. Although it is very likely that this is the sin of the future Ronan can't say anything. After all, scolding oneself doesn't sound good. Why is the other party's target you? You are not from our world either. Could it be? Tony Stark's face changed. He seemed to have guessed something. In this world, Ronan could not have any enemies at all. Because the only people Ronan had fought since he came to this world were Thanos and his army. Now Thanos is dead, his army has been cleared one by one, and even the ships have been destroyed. Therefore, Ronan could not have any enemies at all. Is it possible that I just... But Ronan's eyes widened, and his hands immediately raised above his head, and the ring of Raggeder unfolded instantly. Strange was not slow either, and he also unfolded the same defense. A black magic ring fell from the sky and hit the tops of the two people's heads. The ceiling of the New York temple shattered, and the three magic rings collided fiercely. The buildings around the New York temple also collapsed with this collision. Even under the defensive formation, several other mages were knocked out by the airflow. Tony Stark was no exception. But Tony Stark was more clever. While being blown away, he pressed the opening button on his chest. The Iron Man suit protected him firmly inside. As the three rings of Raggeder were broken, a little golden light flashed in the sky. But in these golden lights, there was some unsightly black. Strange flew out without saying a word. He wanted to see who destroyed this family. However, when he flew out, his figure disappeared in the air in an instant. Ronan raised his head and put his right hand on his forehead, as if looking up at the starry sky. There was nothing in the sky except the scorching sun. There was no need to guess. Ronan was sure that Strange had been locked into the mirror space by the other party, because just now, he felt that very weak spatial fluctuation. This is also the passive attribute that appears after the mirror dimension skill is added. What happened? Where's Strange? At this time, Tony Stark, who was blown away, finally came back. From his tone, he seemed to be a little angry. After all, don't hit someone in the face, and don't expose someone's shortcomings when scolding him. Ronan and Strange were standing there, but he was also a superhero, but he was blown away by the airflow. This was embarrassing, no matter how you think about it. I don't know, maybe he went to outer space. Ronan made up an answer casually, his eyes still fixed on the sky, although he couldn't see the existence of the mirror space either. Outer space? Do you want me to save him again this time? Tony Stark obviously remembered what happened 5 years ago. It was him who rushed onto the spaceship with Peter Parker and saved Strange. Otherwise, it would be uncertain whether there would be a finale. This time Ronan didn't reply, because he remembered a passage that Ancient One had said to him. The mirror dimension involves the secrets of space, and the magicians of Kamataj are only at the elementary stage. In fact, it can't be considered a real space. If the real space is a tall and magnificent house, then the mirror dimension can only be considered a tent. It's not even a shelter. Ronan mistakenly thought that this sentence was an excuse for Ancient One not to teach him about the mirror dimension. But today, Ronan seems to understand something. Thinking of this, Ronan glanced at his system and took a deep breath. When in doubt, the system adds points. As the remaining points in the system changed from 2 to 1, Ronan seemed to have lost something extremely important in his heart. This is his last point. No more points can be added. According to his idea, he planned to return to his own universe and find Ancient One to learn a few more powerful spells. Then add a little more points. Hey, wouldn't he be invincible? However, the plan was not as fast as the changes. Although Ronan has always looked down on Strange, as long as he doesn't do anything related to Peter Parker, his ability is still good. From this point of view, Strange is more like Peter Parker's godfather. After all, it's okay to say that he let the sea go. Back to the topic. With Strange's current strength, he can be quietly pulled into the mirror space. The strength of the opponent can be imagined. Therefore, Ronan still can't save this skill point. Of course, what comes with it is the change of the skill. Mirror dimension. Mirror dimension. +2. Create a mirror space that is exactly the same as the surrounding reality, but completely independent, and can lock people or objects into the mirror space. The strength of the mirror space depends on the caster's spellcasting level and the strength of the spell. +2 features. You will feel the fluctuations in the surrounding space more clearly, and you can change the environment in the mirror space, not limited to the current venue and weather. The strength of the mirror space is greatly improved, and you can actively interfere with the enemy's vision through illusions. The effect depends on the enemy's ability to resist illusions and mental strength. Note, when changing the environment in the mirror space and using illusions, your mental power will be consumed, and the greater the modification, the more mental power will be consumed. Ronan took a deep breath and tried to maintain his calm expression. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Don't let Tony Stark see your inexperienced look. It's just an upgrade of skills. What's the big deal? It's just a little bit stronger. But the next second, he finally couldn't help it and broke his skill. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. At this moment, Ronan announced that he officially joined the Uchiha for Laughing Heroes. Hehe. Tony Stark on the side looked at Ronan as if he was an idiot. He just said that he shouldn't save Strange again. Why did Ronan laugh like this? Is his sentence so funny? Do I have a talent for telling jokes? Tony Stark touched his face. He was a little doubtful about his life. However, Ronan stopped laughing quickly, and his face became calm again. After all, masters are the kind of people who keep a cold face and say nothing, and then look at the other party silently. When they are about to make a move, they will show a hint of evil and crazy smile, and then kill the other party. Of course, evil and crazy is fine. With his evil and mad face, he looks a bit like a domineering president. He is going to save Stranger next. Just don't make the plot into a domineering president and a naive heroine. Bang. At this moment, Strange, who had disappeared for less than a minute, finally appeared. But the way he appeared was a little unexpected. He fell from a height of more than 10 meters in a free fall. From the looks of it, he should have landed on his face. Similarly, a figure appeared in the sky. That person wore a hood and his face could not be seen clearly. I'm mad at your mother. Stop it. You villains like to dress like this? Please recommend and vote for me. Chapter 49. I know you are anxious, but don't be anxious yet. However, Tony Stark is still quite loyal. When he saw Strange was about to fall on his face, he still flew to the sky and hugged him down. A standard princess hug. TSK. If some fans of Iron Man and Captain America saw this scene, they would probably go crazy. Even Ronan can announce that Strange stocks have risen sharply. Ronan, you still showed up. The man in the sky seemed to recognize Ronan at first sight. Ronan touched his face, and he really couldn't blame the other party. After all, his face was still very recognizable. I guess my future self will also be a mature uncle, right? Can we stop pretending? Aren't you tired of wearing a hood every day to pretend to be mysterious? Ronan raised his head and looked at the new version of the hooded man in the sky and couldn't help but sigh. If it weren't for the different accents of the two people, Ronan could really think that the one in front of him and the one he saw on Vormi were the same person. But, to be honest, the one on Vormi was a bit too shabby. The clothes on his body were all tattered. The man in front of him, the clothes he wore, were worth a lot of money. They were not in the same league at all. Hey, your mouth is so annoying, no matter how old you are. Hiss. When the other party took off the hood in front of him, Ronan couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Because the man in front of him was not a hooded man, but a hooded woman. In fact, she looked pretty good. Could it be that my future self had done something wrong and was retaliated by this woman? Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but shudder. You know, when women get angry, they are much more brutal than men. A specific example is the big white Scarlet Witch, who almost tore Thanos apart with her hands after losing her husband. I'm just asking, nothing else. Do you know me? I'm not the one who abandoned me after having sex, am I? Ronan glanced at the half-crippled Strange and decided to have a good talk with him first. The underworld is never about fighting and killing, it's all about human relationships. Since the other party knows me, and judging from what he said, it is very likely that he knows my future self. That favor has already been established. Next, it depends on whether the other party is worldly wise or not. However, when Ronan said the last sentence, the woman's originally calm face immediately showed anger. It was as if Ronan's words turned on some switches in her. Switches? Ronan, as the Supreme Sorcerer, is your mouth the only thing you have left? Don't you know the responsibility of the Supreme Sorcerer? It's over. Ronan slapped his forehead. It seems that, even if he is not the one who abandoned her, after having an affair, he must have offended this woman severely. Did he ignite a few sparks and accidentally threw them on the gasoline? Judging from the temper of this woman, it seems that she has really done something unforgivable. That, although I know you are anxious and angry, please don't be anxious or angry. Let's make it clear, so that even if we have to divide the blame, we can divide it clearly, right? What am I to you? Ronan sighed. He felt that his life was really bitter. It was obviously the sin of his future self. Why did his present self have to bear it? Since others have traveled through time to beat up your past, why don't you show up and play with them? Bang. The moment Ronan finished speaking, a magic ring hit his head directly. Ronan naturally would not sit there and wait for death and dodge the attack. The only thing that was damaged was the floor of the New York temple. You know, your personality is really annoying. It seems that you don't care about anything, as if you don't care about anything. Why? Why are you so lucky? You can always hide under the wings of others and show a face of laughter and anger at everything in the world. What qualifications do you have? What qualifications do you have? Perhaps Ronan's words touched a pain point in the woman's heart. At this moment, her pretty face was full of anger. No, it should not be said to be anger. Because Ronan saw boundless hatred in her eyes. The other party seemed to hate him very much. Ronan even saw a blush on his face. But this blush quickly turned white, and the speed of change was extremely fast. So this is what you want to say? Ronan raised his eyebrows. It seems that this woman does have a grudge against him. Moreover, the hatred seems to be not small. However, as soon as the voice fell, Ronan laughed out loud. His laughter was clearly transmitted to the woman's ears, and this laughter was tantamount to adding fuel to the fire. What are you laughing at? Is what I said funny? The woman's face was distorted at this moment. She couldn't accept Ronan's laughter. She was criticizing Ronan seriously, but Ronan seemed to be laughing happily. Yes, what you said was really funny. I even want to record it and use it as a joke when I'm unhappy. Ronan stopped laughing, but his words undoubtedly ignited the woman's anger again. A joke. He actually thought it was a joke. The woman's body was shaking, her hands were clenched into fists, and her nails had pierced deeply into her palms. Drops of blood actually slid from her palms. Facing the woman's knife-like eyes, Ronan did not have the slightest intention of repenting. Even though he could clearly feel the surging magic in the woman's body. But he continued to stimulate the woman. Although your acting is great, can we change the way we perform? You make me look like a villain. After all, you look like I killed your whole family. Ronan couldn't help shaking his head. Why did every villain he met look the same? They all like to wear hoods to hide their identities. And each of them seems to have a very miserable life experience. Even their miserable life experiences seem to be related to Ronan. This really makes Ronan look like a villain. Go to hell. The woman seemed to be unable to hold back her inner anger, and the magic power in her body burst out instantly. In an instant, the mirror space surrounded Ronan and others again, and the speed was so fast that it was unimaginable. At the moment, when Ronan was surrounded by the mirror space, ice-like bows and arrows immediately appeared around the woman's body, and the arrows of these ice arrows were all aimed at Ronan. The next second, 10,000 arrows were fired at once. Like a rainstorm, ice arrows fell on Ronan's head. Ronan narrowed his eyes slightly, clenched his left fist, touched the palm of his right hand, and then opened his hands again. The Ring of Ragador. The golden magic ring rapidly enlarged, and the shield engraved with countless mysterious symbols blocked Ronan and Tony Stark. Bang, bang, bang. Countless ice arrows hit the shield like hail. With each hit, ripples appeared on the Ring of Ragador. Ronan's face became more and more excited. The taunting was already full. The pig playing step was very successful. The next step is to eat the tiger. This book is currently ranked 16th on the new book list. I'm going to make it to the top 10. Please give me some monthly tickets. OTZ. Chapter 50 Eat a Tiger. The ice arrows, like a violent storm, not only brought a strong attack, but also a rapidly falling temperature. Ronan could clearly feel that the temperature around him had dropped by at least 10 degrees. No, more than that. Looking at the ground, that was freezing rapidly under his feet. Tony Stark's pupils shrank slightly. Ronan, we can't just sit there and wait for death. Tony Stark obviously found something wrong. After saying this, he flew into the air, opened his hands at the woman in the air, and instantly fired 2 energy cannons at her location. The energy cannons were so fast that they arrived in front of the woman in almost the blink of an eye. However, the woman not only had no intention of dodging, but she didn't even defend herself. The next second, something happened that Tony Stark couldn't believe. The 2 energy cannons he fired, when approaching the woman, seemed to have stepped on the brakes and stopped in front of the woman. No, that's not right. It should have been fixed in front of the woman. Because Tony Stark could see clearly that the surface of the energy cannon was actually covered with a layer of ice. Walter? Tony Stark couldn't help but exclaimed. This was a brand new version he had never seen before. Ronan, who is this woman? When did you offend such a woman? Have you ever been infatuated with her and then abandoned her? Even at this time, Tony Stark still didn't forget to complain. How should I know? Do you think I have a third eye? I'm just an ordinary 16-year-old high school student. Nothing special. Ronan rolled his eyes. He also wanted to know when he offended this woman. Could it be that the woman fell in love with him and kept pursuing him, but he didn't agree? In the end, the woman couldn't get what she wanted, so she turned against him directly. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but shudder. No, I have to break her fantasy. At this moment, a soul-stirring cry came from the sky. Tony Stark fell to the ground with a Thomas rotation of hundreds of degrees. Then there was no sound. Hiss. Seeing Tony Stark fall down like this, Ronan couldn't help but take a breath. Even if the outer surface was tied with iron, it would hurt to fall down like this, right? If he hadn't heard Friday's vital signs are stable, Ronan really thought he was going to die. However, Thanos couldn't take him away even with a snap of his fingers, so to be honest, this woman couldn't take his life. Ronan, are you just going to hide behind like a mouse? Where is your ability to brag before? The woman's voice was as cold as the ice in the sky. The faint smile in her words seemed to be mocking Ronan. No, not like she was mocking Ronan. You're not done yet, are you? Bang. With a bang, the woman floating in the air was actually knocked away by Ronan with a punch. Although it was a sneak attack from behind, it was something the woman had never expected. Before the woman could react, Ronan rushed in front of him again, and a golden halo appeared on his wrist. He could feel that his strength was increasing. The villain dies because he talks too much, do you understand? Bang. A punch that broke the woman's face hit her right eye socket, and the dark circles under her eyes were clearly visible. The woman's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she saw. She didn't understand why Ronan, who was passively beaten before, actually launched such a fierce counterattack. And how could he be so strong at this time? Love but can't get it, right? Bang. Love turns to hate, right? Bang. You want my body, right? Bang. Left, right, left. Ronan's 3 punches from left and right hit the woman's eye sockets by coincidence. A pair of freshly baked panda eyes were clearly visible. Ah. The woman's extremely sharp voice rang out. She knew that Ronan was definitely doing it on purpose. Those punches almost hit the same place, no more than 1 millimeter above, below, left, and right. Ronan, I'm going to kill you. How dare you? Ah. However, before the woman could finish her words, he was interrupted by Ronan again. To get involved, bang. You need to have power, bang. You also need a background. Bang. What the hell are you doing? Bang. Ronan's 4 consecutive punches, each of which hit the woman's lower abdomen. The woman's eyes widened, and her body was bent like a shrimp. She would never have thought that she had tried every means to cross the timeline and wanted to eliminate Ronan in advance. But she would be beaten up by Ronan. Boom. The woman's body fell heavily to the ground, like a rag doll, thrown away by the roadside. Ronan shook his hands, and a helpless look flashed across his face. Do you understand the value of Kamataj's bodybuilding technique? He is a mage, worried about being bullied at school, but he has practiced close combat for 10 years. Also, let me ask you, do you understand what Kamataj's #1 male fist is? Although Ronan's movement stopped, a secret door appeared in front of him. The ice arrows rushed into the secret door, and then fell from the woman's head. The huge ice arrows bombarded the woman's body. Under the huge impact, the woman's body began to shake non-stop. Hey. Ronan curled his lips. Fighting is fighting. Why are you still doing pornography? Do you know that I'm only 16 years old, underage? As the fierce shaking ended, the woman stood up from the ground again. In addition to the pair of striking panda eyes, a blush appeared on the woman's face. That's right, she was angry. With her strength, she could obviously crush Ronan, but she was shamelessly attacked by Ronan. So, the more she thought about it, the angrier she got. The blush on her face came from this. There was no other meaning. You deserve to die. I will definitely tear your mouth apart. However, before the woman finished her dirty words, she was hit hard again from behind. Another Ronan appeared behind her and kicked her out. I've discovered that you talk a lot of nonsense. Since you don't like me, come and kill me. Read the lines. I can do that, too. Boom. A golden light flashed, and a huge magic circle fell from the sky and then smashed down on the woman's head. As the magic circle hit, a cloud of dust rose from the ground. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Question mark? A sharp laugh came from the smoke and dust, and Ronan subconsciously shrank his head back with a look of disgust on his face. This woman, wouldn't she be beaten into a mental illness by him? Why is she imitating the female gunner to open the big gun? Boom. Huge rocks exploded one after another, and the woman's figure flew into the sky again. Although she looked extremely embarrassed, she seemed extremely confident. Crackling, there were bursts of shattering sounds around, as if something had cracked. The woman stopped in midair, and her right hand pierced directly into the left side of her chest, and blood gushed out immediately. She actually pulled her heart out of her chest slowly. Visible to the naked eye, blood was still flowing slowly on her red heart. Ronan, I admit that I underestimated you. We have fought so many times, but I never forced you to use your close combat skills once. At first I thought you were not good at close combat, but today, I think I was wrong. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.